Hello everyone, welcome to this discussion of Mains 2024 GS Paper 1. I am Vikrant and I'll be discussing questions on modern history. So, I will talk about modern history. Okay. Shubham sir will take discussion of questions on art and culture, ancient medieval history, world history. So, the subject matter experts will handle the particular questions. Prem sir will take questions of geography and Sakshi ma'am will be addressing the questions from social issues, Indian society and social issues. So if we look at the questions from modern history, they were on expected lines. In fact, the entire paper, GS paper 1 was on expected lines, but I'll refrain from making comments about the other sections. I'll just talk about modern history. Last year also we had seen two questions on from modern history. One of the question was on Gandhi and Tagore, their views on education and nationalism. So in 2023, we had witnessed two questions or 25 markers. The other question was on the impact of colonialism on tribals. So that was last year, 25 marks overall. Then year before that, even in 2022, we had two questions from modern history. One of them was from the period of British conquest of India, that why the Indian armies, why the British East India Company's armies, despite having majority of Indians, they were able to defeat Indians who had bigger armies and better weapons. So that question was asked. That was a 10 marker, I believe. The other question was on the spurt of famines, right? So it was on the spurt of famines. Again, two questions, but these were both 10 markers. So two questions were asked. The year before that, in 2021, you can say 3 to 4 questions were there. How you interpret the question on integration of princely states. So one question obviously was, first question was on the socio-religious reform movements. And you had to discuss the Young Bengal movement and the Brahmo Samaj. The other question was about the integration of princely states. So it is from post-independence, which is also within the sphere of modern history. Then there was a 15 marker on the moderates, that how did they contribute to widening the Indian freedom movement. So you had to talk about the moderates in it. And the question on the constructive program of Gandhi during the civil disobedience movement and the non-cooperation movement. So overall, 4 questions were there, 2 10 markers and 2 15 markers. And in the recent years, in the past 3 years, that is when we witnessed the highest number of questions. So right now we are seeing fewer questions. If you look at the trend overall in the past 10 years, then in the past 3 to 4 years, we are seeing fewer questions from modern history, which is ranging from about 10% to 20%. So modern history is it is hovering between 10% to 20% weightage in your GS paper 1. Of all the previous year papers, if we see, then the questions that have appeared this year in modern history, they were quite predictable, and anyone who is appearing in mains would not be surprised, or he would not have lack of content in addressing these questions. Few of you may have more points, few of you may have less points, but overall none of the questions would have stumped you. Right? The demand of the question, when do I say the question would have stumped you? The demand of the question was not confusing. You didn't have to unravel the demand of the questions. It was quite clear. Direct questions were asked, and these themes are quite predictable. Everyone studies them. So I have already written the answers of these questions because I thought it would be a less time taking exercise, since you are already tired. After writing your mains, many of you may see this, maybe seeing it right now. Many of you will see it later when you are done with your mains. So you have already done some hard work. We wanted to cover this discussion in as less time as possible. So always return on investment should be high for an aspirant. Your investment is your time. Always remember, when you're preparing for this exam, your investment is not money, your investment is time. So without any further delay, the first question, or that is the question number 3 in the GS paper 1, was what were the events that led to the Quit India movement? The operative word here is events. What events that led to the Quit India movement and what were its results? The question could not be any simpler. If you have witnessed, if you have attended any of my discussions earlier, I always say that if it is a 10 marker, you generally have 2 themes in the question. If it is a 15 marker, generally you would have 3 themes. So 2 themes for 15 marker, 3 themes for 15 marker. Okay, 2 themes for 10 marker and 3 themes for 15 marker. So the demand of the question, always the toolkit for answering a question of modern history is 99% of time, whatever is the theme of the question. What is the theme of the question here? It is the Quit India movement. So whatever is the theme of the question, just begin by describing it. What it is, to show the examiner that you are not beating around the bush, you are not going to guess in next 150 words or 250 words, you actually know what you are talking about, and try to have some static information in your description. So according to us, what is Quit India movement? This I have given you 2 ways of covering or introducing this. You can have different dimensions, your words can be different, your approach can be different. However, the end result should be very similar, that it should tell the examiner what the Quit India movement is. Now, how you want to describe it, from which perspective, it is up to you. Let us say 2 approaches I have taken here. So, describe Quit India movement and I will talk about its importance. Okay, why this question has been asked. Always you should let the examiner know that what it is, you are aware what it is, and you know why the question has been asked. So Quit India movement or August Revolution was a mass agitation. Okay. It was a mass movement or mass agitation against the British rule. It was against the British rule. It was launched on 8th August 1942. I always say that if it is a paper of history, then some years, some dates must be visible in it. Otherwise, it is just froth without any substance. Okay. So shadow without substance. Now I will talk about, I have told it was a mass agitation against the British rule. It was launched on 8th August 1942. Everyone knows these things. It is just about realizing at the moment that you don't need any fancy introduction. You just need to give the static information you know about the Quit India movement. Its objective, now I'm talking about objective, was immediate withdrawal. Quit India. Immediate withdrawal of the British rule from India. Plain and simple, 10 marker, 2 lines introduction, done. Or else. Another approach is Quit India movement or August Kranti, August Revolution was a mass movement. Again, I am saying the same thing, mass agitation, mass movement, it's the same thing. It was launched by, I am again informing, now I am laying stress in this introduction, you will see, my stress is on Gandhiji. I am highlighting his role. On 8th August 1942, you have to tell the examiner, at Gwalior tank, with the call for do or die, I am bringing Gandhiji into my introduction. Call of do or die. Again, it is, everyone knows this, nothing new. This call exhorted the Indians or called upon the Indians for a non-violent struggle. Non-violent struggle against the colonial authorities and placed, now I am saying the same thing in a different way, and placed the demand of independence on immediate agenda of the national movement. Okay. This is a better way of delivering the information. It is more polished. It is more effective. However, both of these will do the job. There is nothing wrong in any of these. Both are good. This is just a little better. the way of expression is little better. Okay. Next, context plus theme. Now I will set the context for the first theme of my question. What is the first theme of my question? The first theme of my question are the events. Okay. Even if you don't have so much time in the exam, so it is looking a lot on the board, but if you write in sheet, still I'm on the first page, first half of the first page. I have used only 3 lines in my first page till now. Okay. Then the first theme will talk about the various domestic and international events. Domestic and international events. So what have I written? Let us see. In addition to the long-standing discontent, I understand it did not happen in a day. It is a long-standing matter, but question is talking about events. So how will I address it? In addition to the long-standing discontent generated by the British rule in India since 1757, a series of domestic and international events convinced the Indian leadership to launch the Quit India movement. When you use the word convinced, I have deliberately used this word. This word convinced, I have deliberately used here. And it has important meaning. For those of you who are aware about the Quit India movement, if you have studied it properly, then you would know that there was a dilemma in the among the Indian leaders whether they should launch a movement at this point of time or not. Whether it would seem as an opportunism if they launch a mass movement at a time when British were fighting a war. Especially leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru were not in favor of launching a mass movement. C. Rajagopalachari, Bhulabhai Desai, all these leaders were not in favor of launching a mass movement. Even Gandhi ji, before 1942, May 1942, he was not in favor of launching a mass movement. Okay. And there was a section led by Sardar Patel, Rajendra Prasad, who wanted to seize this opportunity. Okay. Obviously, we know also about the stance of Bose, but we'll not go there because, as I said, I don't want to take a lot of time here. I want to just get down to the answer and let you have that breathing space, a well-deserved break for you guys. See, the points I have given here is also keeping in mind that some of the students who are watching this discussion may not be appearing for mains this year, but it can also act as a source of resource enrichment for you. Okay. Now, what are the various events? Now we have to focus on events. Okay. The first event is, now we will go chronologically. I don't have to, when I'm structuring my answer in history, especially like Quit India movement, which is talking about events, now immediately my mind will go to this chronology, which ended up with the Quit India movement. What was happening in that phase? A similar question has been asked by UPSC that I think it was few years back, that how did the British complicate the transfer of power in the 1940s? Okay. So similar chronological questions are being asked here. You don't have to do anything. This answer could not be any simpler. You will start with the breakout of World War 1939. What happens? The British enlist the Indians in the war effort, declare Indians a party to the war without concurring with the Congress leadership, the ministries in India. So we say dragged India into the war without consultation, which resulted in resentment among the Indians. I will not talk about Congress ministries resigning, all those things I will not talk about because I have to deliver my information efficiently. I have only few words. Then 1939, then I come to 1940. August offer, the Viceroy Lord Linlithgow, because they are under pressure in the World War and they need the support of Indians. So we have Linlithgow's statement or August offer, which offers dominion status. But already since 1929, you can mention this year somewhere, since 1929, our demand from the Lahore session was Purn Swaraj. And that is why we say that the demand for dominion status, Jawaharlal Nehru says, demand for dominion status is as dead as a doornail. since a doornail cannot move in the door, उसमें नहीं जाएंगे अब, ठीक है? So therefore, it is as dead as that, and this contributes to frustration among the Indians that we want independence and they are giving us still, even at this point of time, they are giving us dominion status. Then we have the individual satyagraha. How does individual satyagraha lead to Quit India movement? Because individual satyagraha is a very limited movement. That a satyagrahi, it is also called Delhi Chalo movement, that a satyagrahi will walk from his place of origin to Delhi and he will express his resentment against the war, amongst other things. During this movement, overwhelming enthusiasm was seen among people. Many people, by May 1941, 25,000 people courted arrest. So the enthusiasm of people would also encourage the leaders that people are ready for a mass movement. It is the leaders who are controlling them. People like Gandhi, people like Nehru, that we don't want to launch a mass movement at this point of time. Okay, so this failed to fulfill the aspiration of the Indians, but convinced the leaders of the enthusiasm. Okay, then we have the Atlantic Charter, 1941. A meeting is held between the USA President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister, and they agree they are fighting for the right of self-determination of the colonies under the Axis powers while ignoring the similar rights to the colonies under the British rule. Till now, Gandhi always saw Indian national movement not only as a political movement but as a spiritual movement, as an ideological movement. Gandhi never wanted the Indian national movement should be blamed of opportunism. But when the leaders at the Atlantic Charter, at this conference, they do not talk about the self-determination of Indians. When Churchill says that I have not become the Prime Minister of England to see the dissolution of, to oversee the dissolution of British Empire, India is left out of this charter, and this greatly disillusions the Indian leaders. It exposes the hypocrisy of the British and it evokes a sense of betrayal among the Indians. Okay. Then further, 1939, 1940, 1941. Now we arrive in 1942. Everyone knows about Cripps Mission. It offers dominion status, constituent assembly, but after the war. So we call it, Gandhiji called it a post-dated check on a failing bank. There was nothing new, nothing immediate in it. It was just a time-wasting tactic. It was just a time-wasting tactic. So this also motivates Indians that they are disillusioned by the British, that they will not give us reform. We have to take it from them. The power has to be snatched. So, failure of Cripps Mission. Okay. Fall of Singapore and Burma. Fall of Singapore in February 1942. Fall of Burma in 1942, May 1942. It brings the war, World War, to the doorstep of Indians. And Gandhiji says that the British presence in India is acting as a bait. The British presence in India is a bait for Japanese threat. So therefore, when the war is at India's doorstep, and the way the British had withdrawn from Singapore, the British withdrew from Singapore, they only took with them, they evacuated all the white people from Singapore and they left the people of Singapore to their own fate in the hands of approaching Japanese. So therefore, that also convinced the Indians that British may do similar thing in India. And it is we who will have to fight, may have to fight against the Japanese threat. So Gandhi also wanted to awaken the masses. He wanted them not to be in a state of slumber if Japanese invasion happened. And if British withdrew from India, then it would also remove the bait for the Japanese to invade India. Okay. So it also exposed the British vulnerability. This word is not very clear. British vulnerability. That they were in a very weak position. Continuously they have been losing. Their forces have been retreating right into India now. So this is also, it provides an opportunity for Indians, motivates them to launch a movement. Okay. Then during 1942, when all these events are happening in May 1942, we see a drastic change in the attitude of Gandhi. In fact, we witness what historians have referred to as militant Gandhi. When Gandhi says, leave India to God, and if that is too much, leave India to anarchy, because British say that if we go, there will be anarchy in India. Gandhi says, let there be anarchy, but you go. Gandhi tells his biographer Louis Fisher that I have become impatient. I will go to Congress and try to convince them of launching a mass movement. But if I am not able to convince the Congress, I will address people directly. Gandhi says to the people while addressing them that in this fight, you can choose your own path. I am not asking you for my type of non-violence. You can choose your own path. But however, on 8th August, he says, I expect India will launch a non-violent mass movement. However, there was a drastic change in the attitude of Gandhi from May 1942 itself. So therefore, I have said that Gandhi and Indian National Congress were no longer an ideological restraint, but they had become symbols of liberation. Till now, you would remember the words of Churchill, that Gandhi is the best policeman we have in India. Gandhi withdrew the non-cooperation movement. Gandhi signed the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, Delhi Pact, during civil disobedience movement withdrawing its first phase. Gandhi withdrew the Raulat Satyagraha. But this time, Gandhi says, Gandhi had become a symbol of liberation and not ideological restraint. All these events have changed Gandhi's stance. Now Gandhi is no longer thinking about ideology. Then this is a major reason, economic hardship. The entire burden of the war in Southeast Asia had been shifted as a burden to the Indians. And therefore, because of this burden, there was mass poverty, there was unemployment, there was inflation. Famine was witnessed in 1943. Already the conditions of food shortages were being witnessed in India. In 1942 itself, millions of people died. And therefore, this also convinces the Indians to launch a mass struggle against the British. So, economic hardship. All this, what does it do? It created a widespread suffering and increased the anti-British sentiment. So this, I have addressed my first theme of my question, that what are these events? Indian domestic events and international events. Okay. Now, I'm preparing now the theme for, see, you can avoid some of these if you want. My job standing here is to give you what almost a perfect answer would look like. Okay. But in exam, you don't have so much time to be perfect. Okay, even this answer would not be perfect. Let me not just pat myself on the back. However, what I mean to say, that you may not be able to include all these things in your answer, but what you cannot miss? You cannot miss the introduction. One of these has to be there. You cannot miss all these points in your answer. Okay. Then always it is better to set the context of what you are going to write. So I will say that in this backdrop, Congress, again, it is showing my factual knowledge. The main reason why I have included this is that I want to show the examiner that I am also aware of the Varda resolution, which was passed on 14th July, and this Varda resolution was passed by Congress Working Committee. And on 8th August 1942, this resolution was accepted. See, in the exam, however good answer you write, you will not get generally out of 10, 6.5. Why? Because all these things are lacking in your answer. Obviously, that is because of lack of time. Or it may be because so many points may not pop up in your brain at that point of time. However, if all these things are there, then it would definitely convince the examiner not to deduct your marks. You would be moving closer to that 10. Okay. So obviously no one, even the person who is talking all this, he did not get 10 out of 10 in the question, because that is the nature of the exam. But we should at least have an idea about what is an ideal. Okay. Okay. Next theme of the question, you would remember, it was asking about the results. That what was the result of this movement. So In the early hours of 9th August, all important leaders of Indian National Congress were arrested, rendering the movement leaderless. This is what I wanted to tell the examiner, that I know what happened there. The unique features of the movement, though even it is not asked, that is why you can avoid it. But it is always a good idea to mention it in one line. The unique features of this movement included sabotage of official communication, Azad Dasta by J.P. Narayan, parallel governments, okay, underground activities, unprecedented violent suppression, aerial firings, all that happened. So I don't have time to say all that. I'll say unprecedented suppression, use of army, 57 battalions were mobilized, 56 battalions. Mass arrest through the use of emergency provisions, I have mentioned, though not asked. Okay. The movement had far-reaching consequences. This is my next theme. Okay. You can avoid all this from here to here. This can be avoided. In the exam, you can directly jump to this theme. What were the consequences of this? Take care. What were the consequences? Further consolidation of Indian national movement, because all anti-British forces, because of the suppression that they faced, when the suppression is uniform, reaction is uniform. Reaction is identifying a common enemy in the British crown. So, further consolidation of Indian national movement, erosion of loyalty towards the British. Again, many of them believed in the humanitarian and the liberal approach of the British. That was exposed with the suppression. Efforts to resolve deadlock between the Muslim League and Indian National Congress. You would remember the CR formula by C. Rajgopalachari. Then the Desai-Liaquat Pact. Desai-Liaquat Pact. In 1944, 1945. Then Muslim League consolidated its influence in the official circles. Muslim League showed itself as very responsible. Jinnah says that British are fighting a war and that is why we are not disturbing you, we are not launching any mass movement, and this consolidated his demand for Pakistan. In 1943, he makes it clear that the objective of the Muslim League is creation of an Islamic state, that is Pakistan, and now he has more support in the official circles because when British were fighting a war, he had not launched a mass movement. You would know that communist, the Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, they had stayed away from the movement. Even many leaders of lower caste, the depressed classes. Okay, just give me a break, one moment, I'll be back. So we were exploring the reasons, the outcomes of the Quit India movement. Now Congress moved from the mode of agitation to constitutionalism, as it has been observed that Congress itself was now in the process of becoming the Raj. Even during the Quit India movement, when Gandhi had was giving instructions to the different sections, he asked the government, asked the government servants to declare allegiance to Congress. He did not ask them to resign. And he did not want to politicize the army. That is why he just asked them. He did not ask them to declare allegiance to Congress, to the army. He said, do not fire upon your countrymen. So, during this movement or after this movement, we see that the Congress now moves from the mode of agitation to constitutionalism. They realize that their just power is in their grab. Okay. Next, it weakens the British authority. Obviously, when every section of the Indian society is protesting, now it convinces the British that they cannot hold India against their wishes, and that is why they want to leave with a golden handshake, or as we say, a negotiated and ordered withdrawal. A negotiated and ordered withdrawal was considered better than departing as a result of a rebellion or revolution by the Indians, as seen in the Wavell Plan. So you may know about the Wavell Plan, but you may also know about the Wavell Breakdown Plan, when he says that if the deadlock between Muslim League and Congress is not resolving, then let us leave the mainland India to Congress, because these are Hindu majority states. There is no provinces, there is no dilemma regarding, no confusion that where they will go. The confusion is only regarding the states in the northeast and the northwest. So the government can withdraw to these and we can decide about these provinces, northwest provinces, Balochistan, Sindh, Bengal, Assam later and leave mainland India to the Congress. Okay. It prepares the revolution because it politicized the entire country. So it prepares a fertile ground for INA agitations. When the soldiers of INA found by Subhash Chandra Bose, they are arrested and they are tried at the Red Fort. So you would know that it leads to the 3 uprisings, that is 2 in Calcutta, the urban uprisings, and 1 at Bombay, the Rin Mutiny, which acts as the last nail in coffin for the British Empire. So it set the stage for widespread national unrest through the Rin Mutiny, and finally it culminated into the cabinet mission, which prepares the blueprint for transfer of power from Indians to the British. So this prepares the ground for the cabinet mission and for the transfer of power and partition of the country. However, cabinet mission, though it in a way resulted in the partition of the country, cabinet mission was for a united India. Okay. Next, finally, we come to the conclusion of this question. In the conclusion, you can take different streams or you can summarize these 3 opinions into 1 or 2 sentences. We have to highlight that this movement did not lead to the immediate withdrawal of the British from the country. However, it accelerated their withdrawal from the country. It may not have led to immediate withdrawal, but accelerated the end of British rule in the country. It changed the policy. You may write, you may avoid this, that it changed the British policy till now that they were following to counter the Indian nationalism of divide and rule. This policy is changed to divide and quit. You can use that line, you can avoid it. The final line, it remains, though it may seem cliche, the values you highlight will create an impact on the examiner. So it is a very cliche line that I have used here. Remains cornerstone of India's national identity, inspiring generations to uphold values. Which values I say now? They will create an impact, or let it be just a cliche or a nothing statement. I am highlighting democracy, highlight the values of democracy, freedom and unity of the country. So that is how we can conclude this answer. Okay. Now quickly I'll move to the next question. So it is a 10 marker. Again, I have said the points which I have mentioned in each theme, they are unavoidable. They should be there in your answers. However, the context, the introduction, the conclusion, it would vary from person to person. Okay. Next, how far? How far? Very important to focus on this word, otherwise you will answer only half the question. How far was the Industrial Revolution in England responsible for the decline of handicrafts and cottage industries in India? How far? When the examiner, he or she is not asking you that please explain, or just the question is not beginning from here. The Industrial Revolution in England was responsible for the decline of handicrafts and cottage industries in India. Illustrate. There is only one theme then. Examine. Almost one theme. Okay. It is saying how far. That question itself is giving you an answer that Industrial Revolution is responsible for deindustrialization of India. But what else is responsible for deindustrialization of India? So there will be 2 themes in this question. 2 themes in this question. The first theme is here. The role of Industrial Revolution is one theme. The next theme is that if you just focus on the Industrial Revolution, it does not reveal the complete picture. This is our theme 2. Okay, so now let us look at the answer quickly. In the introduction, I will again describe what is Industrial Revolution briefly. Okay, Industrial Revolution, what is it? Technological and economic transformation. Where in England, obviously it is given to us in the question. When? In the mid-18th century, which led to innovations such as, if you can mention these, power loom, steam engine, spinning jenny. No need to go in much more detail. It is done. You have told examiner, you know. You have already moved ahead of the competition. Then in the context, industrial revolution, now you are setting the context of the question, that in what context, why this question has been asked. Industrial revolution in England has often been cited by nationalists such as Rajnipal Medat, Ramesh Chandra Dutt, in their famous books, India Today, in his book, Economic History of India, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, and by others as the primary factor for destruction of handicrafts and cottage industries in India. ठीक है, okay. Or instead of writing all this, writing all the names of historians, if you want to give in detail perspective of a particular historian, you can talk about only one historian. ठीक है. Or Rajnipal Medat, in his famous work India Today, he says that destruction of handicrafts occurred in India during the era of free trade. You would remember, you would know that he talked about 3 stages of colonialism, and in the second stage, the deindustrialization occurred in India, era of free trade, when homeland of cotton was inundated with cotton. We were the primary, the Indian textiles was calicos, muslin was famous across the world. That was the reason for our riches. The cotton itself became the reason for our demise. We were inundated. We were under debt. We were exploited on the basis of cotton. It becomes the reason for our exploitation. So you would have also heard the statement that whoever says industrial revolution means cotton. So now coming to this, in 1757, 50% of the world handicraft, see, whenever a question is on economic history, statistics become very important. So in 1757, 50% of world handicraft demand was fulfilled by India. By 1947, this had reduced to 1%. It is a well-known fact, okay, mentioned in many places in your textbooks. Now, Amiya Bagchi, this name may not be mentioned, but if you refer to any IGNOU material, NIOS material, anywhere this fact is mentioned again and again, the statistics, that weaver and spinner population declined from 62.3% to 15.1% between 1809 and 1901. 1809 1901. Fact is mentioned in many sources. कोई नायाब fact नहीं है ये. Industrial population declined from 18.6% to 8.5% during the same period. And our destruction of our handicrafts, now we are setting up, we are telling the examiner that we are aware about the importance handicrafts played in the Indian economy. Destruction of handicrafts and cottage industries has been called as the first great deindustrialization of the modern world, which completely changes the pattern of trade. Very important keywords to mention. Pattern of trade. And India's share in the world GDP declined from 25% to 2%. Okay? 25% to 2%. Destruction of handicrafts and cottage industries is akin to deindustrialization of India. Now you can draw this simple diagram that how did we contribute to industrialization, how industrialization is in Britain was developed on the back of deindustrialization in India. So we are providing England raw material, capital, labor, access to market, and all this is being provided at throwaway rates, less than the cost of all this, because we are under the political control of the British. And England is providing what to the Indians? It is providing finished products. Buy cheap, sell dear. Okay. So at a high cost, at a low cost. Okay. Now, you can just give a subheading for this. The British economic connection with India. That is it. The examiner, trust the examiner, he is understanding what you are trying to say. Now we come to the theme of the question. Okay. First theme, role of industrial revolution in destruction of cottage and handicrafts and cottage industries transformed India from a manufacturing economy to supplier of raw material. To a supplier of raw material. Okay. Breaking down the union between agriculture and Indian industries, all are keywords. Don't need to write complete sentences. Write this. Enough. Mass production of machine-made textiles, again keywords. Mass production of machine-made textiles, what does it do? It floods the market with these cheap products, cheaper than handicrafts. So So therefore, trade competitiveness, your goods are no more competitive in the market. So they will be, the English products will be preferred. Then the tariff barriers, crucial role they have played. Tariff barriers hurt the trade competitiveness. How? One-way free trade. They are buying raw materials at an extremely cheap rate, selling you finished products. If any Indian wants to import the raw materials into the country for manufacturing, he will have to pay heavy duty. If Indian wants to export raw material, export finished products, he will have to pay heavy duties. If India wants to export raw material to England, cheap. If India wants to import finished products, cheap. So that is one-way free trade. Protection to nascent industries. See, the British industries would have been killed in their infancy in the nascent stage if protection was not provided to them. Just like in case of USA, just like in case of France. But for India, no such protections were available, and they were united. Protections were available to the English industries, and India was completely without any shield, was exposed to these global changes. So heavy duty on Indian export, which break down the well-established links between the export destinations like China, Japan, Persia, Egypt. So we were exporting to all these places, but because of heavy duties on our export, these links are also broken down. The quest for new markets, because now the industrial revolution is maturing. It started in the 1760s, 1770s, in fact 1780s, when the real industrial revolution begins. And by 1813, the British industries are producing a lot. Now where to sell it? So they want new markets. That is why the Charter Act of 1813, it ends the monopoly of the company. And now we see the overflow or inflow of British products into the country. Railways, invention of steam engine, it results in the development of railways in India, which leads to development of underdevelopment. It has been called as an extractive infrastructure, which was extracting the resources of the country, because now the British could extract raw materials from every part of the country, thus further harming the industries. And now they could sell their products in hinterlands of the country, where till now they could not reach. So therefore, again, domestic markets are also disappearing. Then the economic drain of wealth. As I told you, that industrial revolution in England was done on the systematic theft from India, and thus capital was not available to the Indian industries. As Cambridge economist Utsa Patnaik has recently highlighted, that between 1765 and 1939, the British drained $45 trillion from the country. $45 trillion. Right now, the GDP of England is about 2.2. So they will have to pay us for over 20 years to repay the amount. Okay. Next. Now we talk about that industrial revolution is responsible for deindustrialization. Agreed. However, there are other factors also. The British policies also are responsible. British policies in India are also responsible for deindustrialization. See, it is a very interesting question, and it gives you a lot of freedom to play around with your answer. For instance, I may not have to mention the railways or economic drain or Charter Act under the industrial revolution. These could have even been mentioned under the British policies. However, because all these are a byproduct of industrial revolution, that's why I have mentioned it under them. There is nothing wrong in it. Or you can mention it here also, that would also be right. But these points should be there, and these two themes should be there in your answer. Then what have I said? I have said that, however, if one focuses only on industrial revolution as a reason for destruction of handicrafts, it does not reveal the complete picture. There were other contributing factors also, like the loss of patronage. How? Through the subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse, there was dispossession of Rajas and Nawabs, who were the real patrons of the Indian arts, these luxury products. Now these Rajas and Nawabs are no longer there. Who will buy the products? There is no one to provide the patronage to the karkhanas. So dispositions of Rajas and Nawabs. The brown Englishman created by, for instance, Macaulay's Minute. What does Macaulay's Minute say in 1835? Macaulay's Minute says that the objective of British English education in India is to create a class of Indians who are Indians only in race and color, but British in taste, opinion, and intellect. These are brown Englishmen. They don't prefer Indian products. They prefer English products, not dhoti kurta. They prefer trousers and coat tails. Okay. So loss of patronage. Then Dadni system. Dadni system. See, okay, Dadni system. What is Dadni system? When the advances were made to the Dadan, or the advance was paid by the Gomastha to the artisans, and these artisans now could not take orders from the local industries. They were never in a position to fulfill even the old orders, for which they were being paid very less money. And due to fear of violent repression, the artisans were agreeing to the terms of Gomasthas. The Patta and the Kabuliyat were signed, which leads to forced deindustrialization. The thumbs of weavers and spinners were crushed if they did not agree to supply this raw material. Political control post Battle of Plassey. Simple point, because they control the political situation. The objective of controlling the political situation is to control the economic situation in the country. Okay. Next, weakness in the Indian social structure, which was further aggravated by the British presence, because in India, the upper caste person, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, they have access to education. They are learning about innovations in England, while the lower caste producer, the Vaishya and the Shudra, who are involved in selling, trade and production, they never learn about what is unfolding in England. And since these two people never talk to each other, the modes of production, they remain primitive in the country. This is aggravated by the downward filtration theory, which targets to teach English education only among the top tier of the Indian society. Okay, so therefore modes of production would remain primitive. In the conclusion, I give you two options. Okay. Or if you have this space, both the options, you can first tell in one brief line, you must tell that destruction of handicrafts, because it is so important and it is a 15 marker. I would rather say you should use both for a 15 marker. That this destruction of handicrafts had a domino effect on Indian economy, which leads to de-urbanization, de-peasantization, unemployment, pauperization. When the rural poor labor wages crash, it leads to pauperization in the Indian society, de-peasantization. They lose the possession of their land to the money lender, land degradation due to commercialization of agriculture, plantation of indigo. It degrades the land, and famines which kill millions of people. UPSC has already asked a question on it. So, leads to death of millions of people. Now, how does this, our conclusion in history should always be about long-term factors, long-term implications of anything. So what is the long-term implication? Economic exploitation sowed the seed of resistance and nationalism, as deindustrialization became a symbol of oppression. It is breaking this moral authority of the British, who showed themselves as my baap of Indians. Now the true picture is exposed by the Indian economist, nationalist. As deindustrialization became symbol of oppression, you can end it with the Swadeshi movement and the non-cooperation movement. That non-cooperation movement and the Swadeshi movement, they arrived as saviors of Indian handicrafts, and the indigenous demand was revived based on the patriotic appeal. Then again we will see growth sprouting of Indian industry. So you end on that Swadeshi movement and NCM came as saviors to Indian handicrafts, which revived the demand for Indian goods based on patriotic demand. Okay. So these were two questions on modern history. Shubham sir will now take questions from the other parts of history, ancient, medieval, world history and the art and culture. Okay. Thank you everyone.
So, hello everyone. Let's start discussion of ancient medieval history, art and culture, and world history portion. So these are the three different subjects which will be basically discussed by me. So the question number one, underline the changes in the field of economy, society from Rig Vedic period to later Vedic period. So Rig Vedic period के बारे में पूछा हुआ है. So basically Rig Vedic period, which means early Vedic period. So how economy and society shifted from early Vedic period to Rig Vedic period. So it's a very straightforward question, very informative one. Before answering this question, let's try to understand the first thing we should keep in mind, if you guys are not aware, whatever social, cultural, or any change which happen in a society, that is always driven by an economic factor. Economy is the most important driving factor, which is the driver of change. Okay? Which is the driver of change. So economy, if we have to understand these changes in the society, we have to understand how the nature of economy shifted from early Vedic period to later Vedic period. ठीक है? तो देखो हुआ क्या? As we already know that Vedic period can be classified into early Vedic period and later Vedic period from 1500 to 1000 BC, early Vedic period, and 1000 BC to 500 BC, later Vedic period. ठीक है? BC. Although iron was discovered during this period, but we already know, we know that any technology or any new discovery takes time to percolate into the society. So impact of discovery of iron could be felt in the society around 1000 BC. So it was around 1000 BC when iron became ubiquitous, when it became easily available to even a common man. And because of iron, some remarkable change which happened. Using iron, we created tools, we cut forest. We were able to cut forest, and when we were able to cut forest, large land now could be brought under agriculture. ठीक है? Large land. Large land से क्या हुआ? More productivity. More productivity. या more production, जिसकी वजह से tax, now king can have more taxes. Now larger population could be supported. Larger population could be supported. ठीक है? Second change happened with the iron was the production of weapons. Because of the production of weapons, large army. Now king could have large army. ठीक है? Since king was also having more resources than it can maintain a large army. ठीक है? And because of large army, consolidation. क्योंकि early Vedic period में small kingdoms were there. जनपद थे. ठीक है? जनपद या जन थे. लेटर वैदिक पीरियड में यही जन बन गए जनपद. और अराउंड 500 BC यही जनपद will become, these जनपद्स will become महाजनपद्स. तो पहले जन थे. अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड में there were janas. Then janas will increase in size and will become janpad. And those janpad will further increase in size and become mahajanpad. So if we keep this thing, discovery of iron, in mind, we will be able to understand all these social and economic changes which happened in the society. So, देखते हैं कि कैसे हुआ. Social changes. First, we'll be focusing on social changes. Early Vedic period, जिसको हम लोग Rig Vedic period भी कहते हैं, and later Vedic period. So, society was patriarchal, but not very strong. Patriarchal element in society were not very strong. They became strong in later Vedic period. Here, Varna was according to profession. Now Varna was decided during later Vedic period by birth. by birth. ठीक है, by birth. Then position of women was better. Here position of women in the society declined. ठीक है, society became more patriarchal. ठीक है, society became more patriarchal, because of which the status of women in the society declined. Here basically monogamy was practiced. Here it became, polygamy became more prevalent. ठीक है, here child marriage, sati, these things were not there. ठीक है, here these things started, ठीक है, taking their place. ठीक है, here there was no concept of gotra. Gotra came into existence. Here only varnas were there. Now varnas were started getting classified into castes. ठीक है, gradually caste system started developing, यानी कि sub classification within the varna system. Society was mostly tribal and egalitarian. Society was mostly tribal and egalitarian. Here society became more stratified. Stratified society with social and economic inequality. ठीक है, social and economic inequality started taking place. ठीक है, so these are some very distinct changes which could be observed from early Vedic period to later Vedic period. ठीक है, यहां पे जो है women का अगर आप देखोगे remarriage, women could remarry, but again in later Vedic period the instances of widow remarriage became more and more scarce. ठीक है, it became more and more less common during later Vedic period. ठीक है, तो ये सारे changes हुए. अब अगर इस चीज को समझना है तो we have to understand the economy. आयरन की डिस्कवरी हुई बिकॉज ऑफ द डिस्कवरी ऑफ आयरन. नाउ सोसाइटी, अब जैसे मान लो इमेजिन करिए कि अप टिल नाउ farmers had the farmers were basically cultivating only small land. Subsistence agriculture was there. Now these farmers could cut forest, and now big land holdings were achieved. Because of that they could produce surplus. तो अभी तक क्या हो रहा था? Why position of women declined? ये समझना है if you want to understand. पहले क्या था? Both men and women were working in the same land. There was no difference in inside and outside division of work. Now, because of discovery of iron, when economic prospect, the status of economy of a particular family improved, तो आदमी ने कहा कि भाई you take care of the domestic chores, I will take care of the outside work. ठीक है? So this inside and outside division of work became one of the first major step towards gender inequality. ठीक है, तो इकोनॉमी से ही शुरुआत हुई. जेंडर इनइक्वालिटी became the one of the major reason, economic progress, ठीक है, led to inside and outside division of work, and that inside outside division of work created gender disparity. ठीक है, ऐसे सारे जितने भी पॉइंट्स हैं we can explain with this simple phenomena about the discovery of iron. ठीक है, पहले लोगों के पास इतना था ही नहीं कि पॉलीगैमी प्रैक्टिस कर सकते थे. Subsistence agriculture, now they were producing surplus, so they could afford to have more wives. ठीक है, people can afford to have, a guy can afford to have more wives. तो मोनोगैमी से पॉलीगैमी सोसाइटी आई. तो इसी तरीके से सारे चेंजेस ऐसे ही हैं. ठीक है, now focus on economic changes. Early Vedic period, later Vedic period. ठीक है, so economy basically pastoral economy. They were generally, जो आर्यंस आए थे इंडिया में, they were basically pastorals. So during early Vedic period, they practiced pastoralism. Now during later Vedic period, by cutting forest, gradually the major mode of occupation and livelihood became agriculture. ठीक है, अभी हम लोग इकोनॉमी देख रहे हैं. Second, society was, there was economic equity या equality. अब यहाँ पे inequality. Society became economically more stratified. ठीक है, inequality की शुरुआत हुई. Because some farmers were able to cut more forest, more land, they were able to cultivate more land, but others could not. तो पहले तो सबकी एक limited land holding थी during early Vedic period. Now some could manage to cultivate larger land by cutting more and more forest. ठीक है, and because of larger land holding, some became richer and some continue to remain poor. ठीक है. Third, cow used to be the measure of wealth. यहाँ पे land now became the measure of wealth. Then internal trade was more common. Internal trade was more common. Here, external trade started, mostly with Babylonians. Okay, mostly with the Babylonians. Then here taxation system was voluntary. Okay, tax जो था voluntary था. It was in the form of tribute. Now here fixed taxation system. Okay, fixed taxation system. Why taxation system was voluntary here? Because there was no permanent land holding. Aryans continued to shift from one place to the other place. जैसे एक जगह पे they settled, they cultivated that land for 2-3 years, then they will move to some other land. ठीक है, semi-nomadism. ठीक है, they practice semi-nomadism. Slash and burn cultivation कह लो या झूम cultivation कह लो या whatever, या मिल्पा कह लो whatever. ठीक है. So since land holding were not permanent, so if you cannot measure a land holding of a particular farmer, then you cannot fix tax on that person. Okay, if king cannot measure, yeah, state cannot measure the land holding of a particular farmer, then how one can fix tax liability of that farmer? ठीक है, क्योंकि 2 साल तक के लिए ही था. Now, during later Vedic period, Aryans started settling. So there was more permanence in the settlement. Okay? There was more permanence in the settlement, and because of which now land could be measured and tax could be fixed. Tax liability on a particular farmer could be fixed. So these are some changes which happened during early Vedic period and later Vedic period. Okay? Chalo. Estimate the contribution of Pallavas of Kanchi for the development of art and literature. So how we are going to approach this question? Estimate the contribution. Estimation karna hai. ठीक है, we don't have to discuss it, we don't have to critically analyze it, we have to just estimate how they impacted, what was their contribution in the field of art and literature. So first we'll write about Pallavas of Kanchi. ठीक है, then we'll write about their contribution in the field of art. Then we'll write about the contribution in the field of literature. So who were Pallavas? You can also try, if you want, you can make a map of India. Okay, this was the area this was the area, not this was the area which was Pallavas. ठीक है, Pallava dynasty. So Pallava dynasty के बारे में लिखेंगे कि they ruled over South India around 6th and 9th century AD. ठीक है, The founder of Pallava dynasty was Simhavishnu. ठीक है, Simhavishnu. Pallavas were the feudatories of the Satavahanas. ठीक है, they were feudatories of Satavahanas. Prominent Pallava rulers are Mahendravarman I, Narasimhavarman I, and Narasimhavarman II. ठीक है, तो Mahendravarman I, Narasimhavarman I, and Narasimhavarman II. So these are the three prominent Pallava rulers. तो इतना हम लोग लिखेंगे about Pallavas, first point में. Then we'll write about the contribution of Pallavas in the field of literature. ठीक है, literature के field में. So first thing we will write that Pallavas patronized Sanskrit and Tamil languages. ठीक है, Sanskrit and Tamil languages. संस्कृत में अगर आप देखोगे some important books, फिर संस्कृत and Tamil language लिखेंगे, and then we will also mention that Kanchi gradually emerged as the major center of the learning of Sanskrit and Tamil languages. इतना लिखने के बाद we'll write about the important books which were written during Pallava period. Book number 1, ठीक है, जैसे Simhavishnu. During the reign of Simhavishnu, there was a court poet जिसका नाम था Bharavi. Bharavi wrote a book named Kirit Arjunya. ठीक है, Kirit Arjunya. It is basically a kind, this book defines या illustrate a kind of fight between Shiva and Arjun. अर्जुन और शिव के बीच की लड़ाई को किरित अर्जुनिया में दिखाया गया है. Bharavi. It was written by Bharavi. नाम लिख देता हूं. Then Mahendra Varman I, he wrote a book मट्टी विलासा प्रहसन, जिसका अगर हम ट्रांसलेट करेंगे तो इट इज लाइक प्लेजर ऑफ अ ड्रंकार्ड. ठीक है, इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ सटायर विच वाज रिटन बाय द किंग महेंद्र वर्मन I हिमसेल्फ. बाकी दांडिन करके देयर वाज अ राइटर, दांडिन, ही रोट काव्य दर्शन. ठीक है, दांडिन. He wrote Kavya Darshan. During the reign of, he was the court poet of Narasimhavarman II, Dandin. ठीक है, फिर बाकी कुछ और भी किताबें हैं. Although it is generally we don't get to see these kind of books like Kaladam, which is a grammar book. Kaladam. It is a grammar book which was written by Kaladanar. ठीक है, Kaladanar. फिर Nandi Kalam Bakam. There is another book called Nandi Kalam Bakam. This was also written. खैर, अब बात आती है आर्ट, लिटरेचर और आर्ट पूछा है. आर्ट में हम लिखेंगे बेसिकली विल बी राइटिंग अबाउट पल्लवा ब्रॉन्ज, देन पल्लवा मुराल. ठीक है, देन टेम्पल भी लिख सकते हैं थोड़ा बहुत. टेम्पल, ऑल्दो टेम्पल को इफ यू आर राइटिंग अबाउट टेम्पल, सो वी कैन राइट, वी कैन फोकस मोर. ये तो आर्किटेक्चर में आ जाएगा, लेकिन अगर लिख भी रहे हैं देन इट वोंट बी हार्मिंग आवर आंसर, इट विल गिव अस मोर कंटेंट. ठीक है, अगर आपको ये लिखना है देन you can tweak your answer more towards sculptures which could be found in these temples. ठीक है, उसके अलावा you can write about not sculpture, you can write about some narrative art form. Pallava bronze, it was made using lost wax technique. ठीक है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल शिवा इन आनंद तांडव, एनसीईआरटी में भी दिया हुआ है ये आनंद तांडव मुद्रा. Then Pallava mural, you can write some of the paintings of Sitan Vansal is related to Pallava period, patronized by Pallava rulers. Sitan Vansal cave paintings. Kuch paintings are from Pandyan period, some paintings are also from Pallava period. बाकी टेम्पल्स में हम लोग 3 इंपॉर्टेंट टेम्पल्स के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं. टेम्पल्स बाय महेंद्र वर्मन द फर्स्ट, नरसिम्हा वर्मन द फर्स्ट, नरसिम्हा वर्मन द सेकंड. ठीक है, so during this period basically cave temples were used, cave temples were made. Here monolithic and Narasimha Varman II में freestanding temples. तो केव टेम्पल्स में आदिवराह टेम्पल बिल्ड बाय महेंद्र वर्मन वन. देन नरसिंह वर्मन वन के बारे में मोनोलिथिक टेम्पल, जिसमें आप रथ टेम्पल के बारे में लिखेंगे, रथ टेम्पल. देन नरसिंह वर्मन सेकंड ने लिखा था, बनाया था शोर टेम्पल, he built shore temple. ठीक है, shore temple. He also built one more temple that is Kailashnath temple. ठीक है, shore temple and Kailashnath temple. तो structure temple या freestanding temples started getting built during Narasimha Varman II. ये सब लिखने से पहले you can also write that the Pallavas were the pioneers of Dravidian temple architecture. So Dravidian temple architecture was started by the Pallava rulers. ठीक है, this thing you can mention. Then you can also mention that कि shore temple में there are various sculptures like famous sculpture of Anant Shayan Vishnu. ठीक है, अनंत शयन विष्णु. तो ये लिखा. फिर अब नैरेटिव आर्ट फॉर्म में आप अर्जुना पिनांस, ये विच इज लोकेटेड इन महाबलीपुरम. अर्जुना डूइंग पिनांस. ठीक है, so these are the art forms and literature during Pallava period. ठीक है, अब इसका कंक्लूजन कैसे करना है? तो कंक्लूजन में ये लिखेंगे कि Pallavas were the torch bearer of resurgent South Indian culture after the dark age of Kalbhras. ठीक है, कालभ्रास को हरा के, कालभ्रास करके एक पीरियड है, जैसे संगम वाला जो पीरियड है, संगम एज के बाद कालभ्रास का पीरियड आया था, उसके बाद पल्लवास के टाइम से अगेन साउथ इंडियन कल्चर विटनेस्ड इज रिवाइवलिज्म एंड रिसर्जेंस. ठीक है, तो आफ्टर द पीरियड ऑफ कालभ्रास, ठीक है, ड्यूरिंग पल्लवा पीरियड साउथ इंडियन कल्चर विटनेस्ड इट्स रिवाइवलिज्म एंड रिसर्जेंस. Pallavas contributed in the field of art, literature and architecture. It not only influenced India's culture, but it also influenced Southeast Asian region, such as Angkor Wat Temple draws its inspiration from Pallava temples. ठीक है, ऐसा करके आप आंसर को लिख सकते हो. And Pallavas left an indelible mark on Indian cultural legacy and all kind of things. You can use good words about Pallavas and you can conclude your answer. ठीक है, चलो आगे चलते हैं. Though the great Cholas are no more, South India पे काफी focus है इस बार. Though the great Cholas are no more, yet their name is still remembered with great pride because of their highest achievement in the domain of art and architecture. Highest achievements. ठीक है? तो कुछ कुछ चीजें हैं which we should keep in mind while answering this question. तो पहला कीवर्ड है Cholas. ठीक है? Second keyword is highest achievement in the field of art and architecture. Okay, in the field of art and architecture. Comment दिया हुआ है, which means it also gives us some scope that we can take our answer beyond the domain, beyond the scope of this question. ठीक है? Beyond this, not the beyond the scope of the question, beyond the scope of this statement. ठीक है? तो चलिए. So first we'll be writing about Cholas. So who were Cholas? तो Cholas, imperial Cholas. आप चाहो तो ये भी लिख सकते हो, संगम Cholas can be classified into संगम Cholas and imperial Cholas. ठीक है? और later Cholas भी है. खैर इसमें जो क्वेश्चन है ग्रेट Cholas के बारे में दिया है, तो बेसिकली इट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट imperial Cholas. Imperial Chola dynasty was established in 850 AD and lasted till 1070 AD. ठीक है? 1070 AD. तो almost like 250 odd years they ruled over Tamil Nadu region. ठीक है? Tamil Nadu region. The founder of Chola dynasty was, Imperial Chola dynasty was Vijayala Chola. ठीक है? So first we'll write, we will make a map. Then we'll write the time period 850 AD to 1070 AD. Then we will write about the founder of Chola dynasty, that is Vijayala Chola. Then we'll also write that Cholas were the feudatories of Pallavas. So Satavahanas के feudatories Pallavas, then Pallavas के feudatories Cholas. ठीक है? अब आर्ट के फील्ड में बात करते हैं. Art. So art can be classified into Chola bronze, then paintings, then dance. ठीक है? Painting and dance. Then poetry. The Chola bronze, paintings, dance and poetry. बाकी आर्किटेक्चर की बात करें तो there are 3 important Chola temples. One is देखो आर्किटेक्चर को हम लोग ऐसे डिवाइड कर देते हैं. टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर, then civilian architecture. ठीक है? Civilian architecture. और since specifically great Cholas दिया हुआ है, it has not mentioned whether it question is asking talking about Sangam Cholas or Imperial Cholas. Then we can also draw some examples from Sangam period also. ठीक है? कुछ आंसर, अपने आंसर को थोड़ा सा बड़ा एंड रिच लिखने के लिए we can also add some examples from the Sangam period. ठीक है? Then civilian architecture में आप बात कर सकते हो तंजावर city planning. Then we can also talk about Kalanai Dam, which was built by Karaikal Chola of Sangam period. Karaikal Chola of Sangam period. Temple architecture में 3 important temples we can talk. Brihadareshwara temple, Brihadeshwara temple of Tanjavur, then Brihadeshwara temple of 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐢𝐨𝐻, Brihadeshwara temple of Tanjavur, then Brihadeshwara temple of 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐢𝐨𝐻, then Aiharavateshwar temple at Darasuram. ये तंजावर वाला was built by Raja Chola. This was built by Rajendra Chola. This was built by Raja Chola the first. This was built by Raja Chola the second. ठीक है? Chola bronze में you write about Nataraja Chola, Nataraja Shiva. Paintings में you will write about the mural paintings at Brihadeshwara temple of Tanjore. ठीक है? Mural paintings of at Brihadeshwara temple of Tanjore. Then dance में लिख सकते हैं कि Bharatnatyam dance flourished during the reign of the Cholas. ठीक है? Bharatnatyam dance flourished during the reign of the Cholas. In context of poetry, we can write, it was the Raja Chola the first who rediscovered Tevaram. ठीक है? Tevaram जो literature है of Nainar saints, it was lost. It was recompiled under the patronship. ठीक है? Under the patronship of Raja Chola. ठीक है? Because of this achievement, he is sometimes also referred as Tirumurai Kanda Cholam. ठीक है? Tirumurai Kanda Cholam, who he is credited for rediscovery of Tirumurai. Tevaram नहीं होगा, Tirumurai बोलेंगे. Tevaram is a part of Tirumurai. अब Tirumurai क्या है? Those who don't know, Tirumurai is the compilation of devotional songs, devotional poetry of Nainar saints. ठीक है? Tirumurai. Tirumurai का एक सब पार्ट है, that is called Tevaram. Those who don't know, Tevaram is the collection of some famous Nainar saints, जिसमें आते हैं अपार, सुंदरार and संबंधार. तो वैसे तो टोटल 63 Nainar saints थे, उसमें these 3 Nainar saints were prominent. तो all these 63 Nainar saints का जो poem का collection है, that is called Tirumurai, and especially these 3 Nainar saints का जो compilation है, that is called Tevaram. Anyways, तो all these things you have written, but question ये पूछ रहा है highest achievement. ठीक है? ये question है highest achievement की बात कर रहा है. तो highest achievement की बात कर रहा है, तो then one thing we have to emphasize that कि all these contribution, all these things which Cholas built or achieved, that was achieved at its highest level. तो जब आप आंसर लिख रहे हो तो you have to keep on emphasizing these things. For example, during Chola period, the size of temple, size of Vimana reached its zenith. For example, the height of Vimana of Brihadeshwara temple of Tanjore is 85 meters. ठीक है? Then you can also write size of Gopuram also increased. ठीक है, size of Gopuram also increased. Then you can write some salient feature about Brihdeshwara temple. जैसे उसके ऊपर जो शिखर रखा है, it is a monolithic शिखर. ठीक है, monolithic शिखर of I think कुछ तो उसका वेट है some 80 tons का है, 80 टन का monolithic शिखर है. Then the temple का जो विमान का size है, that is of highest. Then carving on the outer walls of the temple also is very intricate. It is unprecedented. Then no binding agent was used in building this Brihdeshwara temple. ठीक है, binding agent नहीं है. All the pieces of stones have been just balanced one over the other. No binding agent. So these are the good things you can write. ठीक है, बाकी चोला ब्रॉन्ज के बारे में लिख सकते हो. इससे पहला देखो, हमें ये लिखना है बेसिकली इस आंसर में कि ऐसा नहीं है कि these things were no, Cholas were the pioneer of these art. These art forms existed before Cholas. जैसे ब्रॉन्ज स्कल्पचर वो तो इंडस वैली से चल रहा है. इवन पल्लवास ऑल्सो बिल्ड ब्रॉन्ज स्टैचूज ऑफ बुद्धा, ब्रॉन्ज स्टैचूज ऑफ शिवा. पर जो चोला के टाइम पे जो नटराजा शिवा का जो स्कल्पचर है, दैट इज कंसिडर्ड एज अ मास्टरपीस. ठीक है. Similarly, Dravida temple architectures developed during Pallava period, but it was the Cholas who refined that art and perfected it and made it most magnificent. ठीक है. तो इस तरीके से you have to tweak your answer in order to justify with this statement. ठीक है. चलो. How far is it correct to say that the First World War was fought essentially for the preservation of balance of power? तो हमने पहले लिखना है about World War I. ठीक है. Then we will write in favor कि भाई major reason behind World War I was balance of power. Then we have to, अब ये पूछा how far it is correct to say. It means कि पहले तो आप उसके फेवर में लिखोगे, then आप लिखोगे कि नहीं, यहां तक I agree that World War I was fought for maintaining balance of power in Europe. लेकिन उसके बाद then you have to also write that it was maintaining balance of power was not the sole reason, was not the sole factor, was not the sole cause of World War I. Instead, many other factors played a decisive role in starting World War I. ठीक है. So about World War I, World War I started in 1914, lasted till 1990. ठीक है. Players कौन कौन से थे? One side there was Central Powers. ठीक है. On the other side there were Allies. Central Power में आपके हो गए Germany, Ottoman Empire, then Turkey, then Allies के साइड से Britain, France, USA, and Russia. Then you will write, it was finally it was the Allies who were able to defeat Central Powers, and this war ended with Paris Peace Conference. इतना करके आपको introduction में you have to write. Then you write about favor कि yes, this war was fought because of the balance of power. So let's write balance of power. How balance of power led to World War I. First, in Congress of Vienna in 1814, Congress of Vienna was convened in 1814 after, in order to decide post-Napoleon era, post-Napoleon future of Europe. So major goal of this Congress of Vienna was to establish balance of power in Europe. To establish balance of power in Europe. And because of that, you will see that from 1814 till 1914, almost for 100 years, बीच में कुछ key wars और ये सब हुई, पर वो they were not very significant. For almost 100 years, peace and stability was ensured in Europe. And that became the major factor behind rapid industrialization of Europe, because the 100 years of peace enabled Europe to focus on industrialization and economic prosperity. However, this balance of power was disturbed when in 1871, Germany got united. Germany का unification हुआ 1871 में. After unification of Germany, Germany started harboring the aspiration of becoming hegemon of European affairs. Germany started harboring the aspiration of becoming a hegemon. Similarly, Italy का unification हुआ 1870 में, 70. Italy also started harboring the aspiration of becoming an imperialist power. And because of which, अगर आप सुन लेते हैं, because of these things, a kind of rivalry between Britain and Germany started in order to establish global dominance. तो जर्मनी और ब्रिटेन के बीच में rivalry शुरू हुई. Then secret alliances started being forged. एक तरफ ट्रिपल अलायंस बना, which had Italy, Germany. एक तरफ ट्रिपल अलायंस है जिसमें इटली है, जर्मनी है, ऑस्ट्रिया है. इटली, जर्मनी, ऑस्ट्रिया. इसमें मैंने ऑस्ट्रिया एंड हंगेरियन एम्पायर. एक तरफ ट्रिपल अलायंस है. On the other side, there was triple entente. Triple entente में आएंगे आपके रशिया, ब्रिटेन एंड फ्रांस. तो two rival groups were formed in Europe. Trust deficit की दिक्कत हो गई. Belligerence, hostility, trust deficit, because of which militarization of Europe started. Arm race in Europe started. Arm race and militarization of Europe started. फिर आप देखोगे कि before World War I, Britain was following the policy of splendid isolation. It means that Britain was not interested in interfering into European affairs. Instead, it decided to focus on its rapid industrialization. तो अभी तक जो है Britain was following the policy of splendid isolation, यानी कि keeping itself aloof and isolated from European affairs. लेकिन क्या हुआ कि एक नया राजा आया जर्मनी में जिसका नाम था विल्हेल्म द सेकंड. तो विल्हेल्म द सेकंड आया तो ही स्टार्टेड इंक्रीजिंग नेवल प्रेजेंस अराउंड ब्रिटेन, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ विच Germany discontinued its policy of splendid isolation and decided to become an active participant of European affairs. और ये जो है इसी को कहते हैं बैलेंस ऑफ पावर. एक चीज मैं शायद आप लोगों को बताना भूल गया कि यू हैव टू आल्सो डिफाइन व्हाट इज बैलेंस ऑफ पावर. बैलेंस ऑफ पावर इज बेसिकली equitable distribution of power among all stakeholders in order to create a deterrence which will help in maintaining peace and stability in the region. तो अगर पावर सबके बीच में लगभग बराबर रहेगी तो डेटरेंस होगा. डेटरेंस का मतलब ये है कि इफ आई विल अटैक अदर कंट्री इज आल्सो इक्वली स्ट्रांग, दैट कंट्री विल आल्सो अटैक मी एंड दैट विल लीड टू म्यूचुअली अश्योर्ड डिस्ट्रक्शन. जैसे इंडिया और चाइना के बीच में डायरेक्ट लड़ाई क्यों नहीं होती है? बिकॉज बोथ द कंट्रीज आर ऑलमोस्ट पावरफुल इनफ टू डिस्ट्रॉय ईच अदर, जैसे न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स. ठीक है, आज के टाइम पे इतनी लड़ाइयां इसलिए नहीं होती बिकॉज पावर, नो, वर्ल्ड इज इंटरकनेक्टेड एंड ऑल्सो देयर इज अ काइंड ऑफ बैलेंस ऑफ पावर. देयर इज मल्टीलेटरल वर्ल्ड है ये, मल्टीपोलर वर्ल्ड, जिसमें यूएसए भी है, रशिया भी है, देन यू हैव इंडिया, देन यू हैव चाइना, देन यू हैव जापान, देन यू हैव जर्मनी. ठीक है, तो मल्टीपोलर वर्ल्ड है. दैट्स वाई जैसे अभी even in 2001 America just attacked Afghanistan and Iraq, but now in this present context it is not possible because balance of power is there in the world. So balance of power refers to equitable distribution of power among all stakeholders, okay, among all stakeholders, which will create deterrence, and that deterrence will enable in establishing peace and stability by avoiding war and conflicts. By avoiding wars and conflicts. ठीक है, तो इसको बोलते हैं बैलेंस ऑफ पावर. खैर, तो ये सारी चीजें लिखेंगे कि बैलेंस ऑफ पावर की वजह से ये लड़ाई हुई, क्योंकि जर्मनी एक स्ट्रांग बन गया, तो जर्मनी को अपने आप को जर्मनी वांटेड टू एस्टैब्लिश इट्स हेजेमनी. देन राइवलरी शुरू हो गई बिटवीन ब्रिटेन एंड जर्मनी टू बिकम टू एस्टैब्लिश ग्लोबल डोमिनेंस. एंड when this balance of power got disturbed, that led to formation of secret alliances. Secret alliances bani to hostility, belligerence, trust deficit increased in European countries, among European countries. और जब विश्वास नहीं है, hostility है, that led to arm race and space race. ठीक है, and gradually that culminated into World War I. उसके अलावा there were other reasons also, जैसे अल्ट्रा नेशनलिज्म एंड जिंगोइज्म. ठीक है, अल्ट्रा नेशनलिज्म बेसिकली लेजिटिमाइज्ड वॉर एंड वायलेंस. ठीक है, तो अल्ट्रा नेशनलिज्म वाज प्रिवेलिंग इन अमंग यूरोपियन कंट्रीज एंड अमंग द सिटीजन्स ऑफ यूरोप. सो बेसिकली दे सपोर्टेड, देयर सिटीजन्स सपोर्टेड गवर्नमेंट टू अडॉप्ट क्या बोलेंगे, हॉकिश फॉरेन पॉलिसी. ठीक है, हॉकिश फॉरेन पॉलिसी. नेक्स्ट, उसके अलावा रेस ऑफ कोलोनाइजेशन. तो बैलेंस ऑफ पावर तो है ही, दूसरा जो उसके अलावा जो रीजन है, पहला तो ये है अल्ट्रा नेशनलिज्म, सेकंड इज रेस फॉर कोलोनाइजेशन. कोलोनियल जो है यूरोप में व्हेन इटली एंड जर्मनी गॉट यूनाइटेड, तो टू मोर कोलोनियल पावर जॉइंड द रेस ऑफ कोलोनाइजेशन, बिकॉज ऑफ विच कॉम्पिटिशन अमंग यूरोपियन कंट्रीज टू कोलोनाइज अफ्रीकन एंड एशियन कॉन्टिनेंट इंक्रीज्ड. तो रेस फॉर कोलोनाइजेशन. फिर थर्ड रीजन है डिसइंटीग्रेशन ऑफ ओटोमन एम्पायर. तो व्हेन ओटोमन एम्पायर स्टार्टेड डिसइंटीग्रेटिंग, ऑल दीज यूरोपियन कंट्रीज हैड अ काइंड ऑफ हॉकिश या क्या बोलते प्रिडेटरी आईज ऑन दिस डिसइंटीग्रेटिंग ओटोमन एम्पायर, कि हु विल टेक द लार्जेस्ट पाई ऑफ दैट डिसइंटीग्रेटिंग एम्पायर. तो ये तीसरा रीजन है. चौथा रीजन पैन स्लैव मूवमेंट है. पैन स्लैव मूवमेंट वाज a kind of movement to unite all ethnic Slavic population. Russia was the supporter of this Pan-Slav movement, and Serbia was the lead country. तो Pan-Slav movement की वजह से सर्बिया एंड ऑस्ट्रिया के बीच में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट था, एंड रशिया joined it, and because of which फिर ये assassination हो गया. Immediate cause of World War I, assassination of Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir apparent of who was मतलब to be king, जो राजा बनने वाले थे, युवराज थे of Austrian Hungarian Empire. He was assassinated in Bosnia. ठीक है, सराजेवो करके एक जगह है बोस्निया में, वहां पे उनका assassination हो जाता है, and because of which Austria declared war on Serbia and Russia declared war on Austria, or that became the major flashpoint which culminated into World War I. ठीक है, फिर एक और है कि जैसा आपको पता है कि आफ्टर नेपोलियन spirit of nationalism started prevailing across the globe and especially in Europe. So Napoleon, चूंकि Napoleon was the torch bearer of French Revolution promoted the cause of nation state, nationalism. ठीक है, तो उस समय यूरोप में क्या है कि नेशनलिज्म की बहुत स्पिरिट जो है दैट वाज वेरी डोमिनेंट स्पिरिट, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ विच अभी तक क्या है यूरोप में मोस्टली किंगडम्स हुआ करती थी. ठीक है, एंड दीज किंगडम्स वेयर मेड ऑफ डिफरेंट डाइवर्स population. So when demand for nation state started erupting, so there was a fear of balkanization of these kingdoms. ऐसा लगता था कि ये जो है हिस्सा इस किंगडम का, ये हिस्सा हटके एक अलग कंट्री बन जाएगा, ये अलग कंट्री बन जाएगा, ये ऑल काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स. So basically the king who were heading these kingdoms, they also wanted some kind of war. क्योंकि उनको ऐसा लगता था कि if war will happen, so this war will unite people together. This war will act as a cohesive force which will bring people together again. क्योंकि जो centrifugal force है of nationalism, that was leading to destruction of these kingdoms, dissolution of these kingdoms or breaking of these kingdoms into various parts. तो इनके राजाओं को लगा कि अगर लड़ाई हो जाएगी then all the country will get united. जैसे हम लोग ऐसे पहले बटे रहते हैं हिंदू मुसलमान में, then ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय वैश्य दलित, all kind of South Indian, North Indian, बिहारी, then महाराष्ट्री and all kind of things. पर जैसे ही पाकिस्तान से लड़ाई शुरू होती है या कभी ऐसा होता है, if you have to resist against the Pakistan or China, then we'll all get united. ठीक है, तो यही यहाँ के राजाओं को भी लगता था कि भाई अगर वॉर हो जाएगी तो all these people who are demanding separate nation, they will come together as a unit. So that will help in prolonging the reign of the king. So even native kings supported the war. जैसे रशिया के जो राजा थे निकोलस II of Romanov dynasty, he was also in the favor of war. क्योंकि उनको लगता था कि war होगी, then Russian people will again start respecting him and again start they will get united. तो ये है. So these are the factors, other factors apart from balance of power, which ultimately resulted in World War I. ठीक है, चलो, तो this is about world history question. Other questions will be discussed by their respective faculties. So thanks for watching. Have a nice day. All the best.
Hello students, welcome to the discussion for the society portion of your GS1 paper for this year's UPSC Mains exam. We are going to talk about what these structures might have been, what the good content would be. So let's talk about question 5. It reads, why do large cities tend to attract more migrants than smaller towns? Discuss in the light of conditions in the developing world. Now, the topic of migration is something that we all study in society. The only distinction they've added here is it has to be in context of developing countries, which means I want you to remember that it's not only India specific that we have to write. And you have to remember not to include examples from developed countries, right? Developed countries does not have to be added here. So, one structure I'm selecting here is that I'm talking about the developing country ka conditions that will affect migration first. Of course, specifically these conditions can vary according to your understanding and analysis. But what I'm saying is that a developing country tends to have a composite culture. It has multiple groups of people, whereas developed countries are mostly monocultural. Fair? Then there are certain technological barriers that are there because developing countries may not have that level of developed technology. There is also a shifting of social values. The developing country is moving, is in a moving stage. It is moving from one stage to another, approaching development, because of which the social values are shifting as the country is moving, progressing. It has the higher tendency of a lot of urban slums. It has rural dynamics which affect what the migration and thought processes might be. And there is also a lack of funds for a lot of initiatives in these countries, right? Naturally, you can write this afterwards also. You can write it in the beginning also. Fair? Now, why is it that large cities tend to attract more migrants? You can break them down into push and pull also. You can break them down as a direct point also. Fair? I'm writing both push, pull and generic points. So, pull factors, they might be seeking better jobs in the urban areas, and they might want to escape tier 2 and tier 3 city ka educational limitations. What I'm talking about here is, whenever in a developing country there's a tier 2, tier 3 city, there are going to be limitations for the type of jobs and education opportunities that are there, right? So people might move in pursuit of these outcomes. Then they may also move for pursuit of well-paying rules, meaning that even if you were at a certain position in your tier 2, tier 3 city, once you get promoted, or if you want to get promoted, you might want to move to the regional center of the organization, for the national center of the organization, and that is normally in an urban sector. So for someone who's looking for an IT or service role, which is a well-paying role, which is a higher position in the hierarchy, they might want to move towards a larger city. Then there is also attraction to cities with social and physical infrastructure. Some people are only migrating to escape from the limited, exposure that is there in their small town. They might want to move simply because there's not enough infrastructure there, right, for them to do their daily life. Then in terms of push factor, it can be because there is a decline in support from traditional social systems. It could be, for example, a gender issue, that the girl might have to move simply because the traditional social system of her tier 2, tier 3 smaller town is not allowing her to do the job that she wants to do. Then there is also departure due to social backwardness. For example, if there is a restriction on, say, intercaste, interreligious marriage in the small town, the couple might move to a larger city because the social backwardness is becoming stifling for the people, right? It could also be in the aspect of, say, someone from the LGBTQ community not being accepted in the small town, moving to a large city, right? So push factors. Now let's talk about generic factors. It can be because of local conflicts. Developing countries tend to have a lot of regional conflicts that are there, because of which people might want to migrate to a different region, usually an urban center. For example, the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits in India. You can also talk about the various refugee colonies that are there, right, in the country, which is because of local conflicts. Because for developing countries, the boundaries tend to shift. There is also caste and cultural anonymity in cities, which offer social mobility. Caste for India and class disparity, which is more visible in the smaller towns, is less visible in cities, because of which people tend to move. Women may migrate to their husband's residence, irrespective of whether it's a rural to urban or city to city migration. It tends to happen that women move with the partners that they tend to have. And again, remember that it is also about the social structures of other developing countries. Success stories motivate others to follow. If there was one person from your small town who moved to a larger town, larger city, and got, a part of the dream that they were able to fulfill, so then other people also tend to follow. So there's that effect that happens. Additionally, because of the economic structure in developing countries, certain things are also peculiar in this region. See, informal sector jobs require physical proximity for pursuit. In urban cities, in just the economies of all developing countries, there is a significant proportion of the informal sector. For people to seek a job in the informal sector, it is usually and often necessary for them to go physically face to face and go ask for that job, because of which that proximity is helpful for someone to get that informal job. Then people may also move for mobility for informal to formal sector. If you want to move from informal to formal sector, that shift is more probable in, say, an urban sector, right? This way, I'm writing about these different points which are in some ways generated from traditional migration, but I'm also modifying them to suit the demand of the question of the developing country ka objective. What this means is that, as usual, for us to write in mains, we are being asked questions from the core content, but we have to modify it according to demand. All right, let's move to the next question. Now, what sort of value addition could you add here? Of course, people tend to think that, drawing a map in the exam is something which is risky, which is not risky per se, but again, people tend not to see the opportunity, which is why for us to identify the scope where there is. Let's see the maps that could have been made. So when you talk about urbanization, when you study the topic of urbanization, I'm sure that you learn a map, right? So urban centers in the country. What I'm doing in the exam is I'm modifying that content that I have to suit the demand of the question. What I'm saying here is that particularly in India, I can give a case study of metropolitan cities, right? And what I'm saying here is that in the northern region, for the region centered around New Delhi, we have the highest population density and we have linguistic unity, because of which these people might aggregate to this center. Fair? Then there are also centers of specific industries. So Ahmedabad, Surat, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bengaluru are all for specific industries: the IT industry, the textile industry, the film industry. All those because of all those reasons, people might migrate from all over the country to this particular place, this larger city, for that type of occupation. Then in Kolkata, there is a historical position and there is linguistic unity, including the region of a different country also, because of which there is stronger migration to that region. Then in Chennai region, I'm saying that there is cultural unity, because of which people might only want to move to this particular center, right? Now, I'm not saying that you include all of this content in the exam. No, I'm saying that this could be a part of your answer. How will this be a part of your answer? You could make just this region, right, next to one point, and then take that as a case study. You can just take this North India region, right, and that could be a part of the map. I'm not saying you have to draw the entire map. I'm not saying that this is the only answer. I'm saying that this possibility was there. All right, so that was question number 5. Let's talk about the next question. This was question number 8. It reads, distinguish between gender equality, gender equity, and women's empowerment. Then why is it important to take gender concerns into account in program design and implementation? Fair? So first I'm doing the difference between gender equality and equity, and then I'm comparing it to women's empowerment. My choice here is simply because I can compare equality and equity as concepts, but empowerment is a different story altogether. Fair? So that's why I'm making that choice to divide it as such. You may choose to make 3 different paragraphs about equity, equality, and empowerment. That is absolutely fair. But I prefer this one so that I'm able to compare these two very, very clearly. Of course, in the introduction, you can talk about the challenges that are there for women, right? So because this is an advanced discussion, because we're talking, because I'm essentially talking to people who have written the mains exam. So I do not think that introductions and conclusions are of much distinction or discussion required here, but the content is king. Fair? So for gender equality and gender equity, I'm making 4 arguments, right? Equality means that there is a 50-50 equation between men and women. We are talking about the same treatment. Fair? Then gender equity means that it has to be fair treatment and consideration, meaning it is equality in outcome, right? So for equality, it has to do with things like equal pay for equal work. But for equity, it has to be with something like maternity leave. So I'm taking into consideration the challenges faced by a woman because of the reproductive system that she has, because of the reproductive opportunity that she has, because of which I'm providing maternity leave. But for me to make no distinction between men and women, I am giving them equal pay for equal work, right? So your examples have to validate what you're trying to communicate. Then for gender equality, I say that equal treatment before the law in policies and programs, meaning what is the process through which this is happening. Then for gender equity, I'm talking about treatment according to the needs, circumstances, and contribution, meaning that I'm talking about the fixed aspect here and the discretion aspect here. This is where the rule has to be strict. This is where the discretion has to be exercised, right? So I say, for example, talking about the contemporary affairs, I would say treatment according to needs, circumstances, and contribution, security needs of female doctors in hospitals, right? So that would come under the requirement for gender equity, because that same security need does not exist for the men in the same area, right? So your examples have to validate. Then gender equality, there has to be no discrimination, right? That would amount to gender equality. But gender equity accommodates progressive strategies, meaning in gender equity, I'm trying to create policies to support women to move forward, right? So that could be things like how the commission asks that we encourage female candidates to apply for the UPSC examination, things like that, right? Then gender equality ignores biological fact, right? Whatever biological differences are there, they should be ignored for gender equality. But for gender equity, it has to have acceptance of biological variance. So things like the design of products specifically for women. So there is an argument that the products of the world, for gender equality, I'm saying that it has to accept biological variance. What that means is that we say that whatever variety, the dimorphism that is there in the bodies of men and women, they are different in sizes, different in structure. So products should also be designed keeping in mind the needs of women, right? So things like seat belts, which are supposed to be different, which tend to affect women differently, right? Security equipment, all those things. Additionally, pharmaceutical dosages, because traditionally all of the pharmaceutical dosages and the treatments are tested primarily on men. They might backfire on women. So even in terms of R&D, also research and development, diseases and syndromes like PCOS are underfunded, under-researched, simply because they are not paid into, they're not seen to be as important. Fair? So that has to be with gender equity, that you accept the biological variety, variance that are there between men and women. Now, the understanding is that women empowerment is something that is going to support both equality and equity. Right. So what is female empowerment? Women's empowerment is the goal. It is the objective. It is the act of doing what? Enhancing the autonomy of women, meaning that the freedom, the ability to make their own decisions, the agency that women have, that has to be enhanced. Then it is also to do with improving their social, political, economic status. So it has to do with improving their status in the society. It can be social, political, economical, and different dimensions from there. Now, why is it important in context to these two? It addresses the root cause of disparity, and it is needed for gender equity, right? For us to move from equality to equity, women empowerment is necessary. Now, naturally, I would want you to include the different indices. I would want you to include things like the SDGs, right? And various other goals that are there. So constitutional articles, everything should be there, but I am talking about the inherent content that I would want you to include in your answer. Then, what is the need to account for gender as a dimension in program design and implementation? So I say it is necessary for holistic, sustainable, and inclusive development. Meaning, my argument was that it's necessary for development. What types of development? Holistic, sustainable, inclusive. For example, educate a woman, educate a family, right? So you can use slogans in your value addition. Then, to prevent aggravation of certain inequalities, because the inequalities are already there, it should not be made worse. For example, disaster relief policy should include sanitary napkins in emergency aid. So that is a very specific example that I'm talking about. So because of a disaster, there is already a disruption in the equality structure. There is already a problem. It should not be made worse, right? So gender sensitivity is required in such policies. Then it will enhance the effectiveness of policy and ensure equitable resource distribution. For example, Government of India's policies of doing direct benefit transfers into accounts of the female family head, right? So that is one way. Then compliance is with international norms. So because we are ratifying a lot of agreements to do with gender equality, it is necessary for us to account for programs, account for genders in this thing. It is necessary for us to account for gender in policy development and implementation. Then for social justice, because there has been historic injustice to certain groups of gender. So I'm talking about the inclusion of LGBTQ plus citizens in these policies. Now, remember, whenever there is a question in gender, they're not talking only about men and women. They are talking about all of the genders that are there. So you have to take the opportunity to talk about the spectrum here. Even if you see carefully here, I'm not making a distinction between men and women essentially. Right, 50-50 between men and women, but again, that has to do with identified men and women. Fair. Otherwise, it's quite, inclusive of all of the genders. Then, it builds social capital because of accounting for gender. there is a social structure which becomes stronger, which is why we are going to build social capital. For example, paternity leave for improvement of gender roles in the society. It will improve the social capital. Fair. So again, naturally, you do have the ability, you have the freedom to choose different aspects here, but these are the ones that I would want to talk about. Fair. The next question in this set was about intercaste marriages. Intercaste marriages between castes which have socio-economic parity have increased to some extent, but this is less true of inter-religious marriages. Discuss. So what they're saying is that essentially in our country, people who are from different castes but similar economic and social levels, right? They tend to marry with each other. That trend has increased, but we are also seeing that inter-religious marriages are not happening as frequently, right? So in the introduction, of course, you talk about the rates and the different data points for this. But let's talk about what is the rise of intercaste marriage due to socio-economic parity, right? So because we have to discuss, you have to give reasons, right, and create relations why this is happening. First thing is that families prioritize economic stability over strict caste norms. For example, there is an undue focus on the earning potential of the groom, because of which after a certain package, after a certain earning potential, after a certain worth, the caste of the groom ceases to matter. So focus on the earning potential of grooms. Fair. Then there is also diluted caste identities due to urbanization. Because people are living in urban centers, the caste identities are getting weaker, because of which there is a reduced social cost of breaking norms. If people don't know who is from what caste, the importance of caste falls, which is why breaking caste rules does not attract the same amount of retribution that it earlier did. Then higher education enables open-minded attitude about caste. So people who have higher education, they might not have stringent or narrow-minded opinions about caste. For example, exposure to the ideas and the events from the life of Dr. Ambedkar, right? So if you're studying all those things, there's a lesser possibility for you to have strict caste attitudes. Then cross-caste interactions at workplace. So in the city and in the workplace, because there is intercaste interactions, there is a reduction in the othering phenomena. Notice that I'm using keywords from society that we study very, very effectively here. I'm just saying that because of cross-caste interactions, that perception of the other group, right, of the out group is reduced. Fair? Then economic mobility and success of affirmative policies. Because the country has made significant efforts in affirmative policies, their successes are translating into people's rejection of endogamous, endo-caste marriages. Then emergent youth mindset of marriage as a personal choice based on compatibility. The youth of the country believes that marriage is a personal choice which has to be based on a relationship that they have with their partner. It is a very, very intimate relationship, and because of that, it should be based on compatibility and not outdated rules, because of which the intercaste marriages are flourishing. There's also the influence of media and pop culture. So movies like Masan have contributed to people's exposure to the injustices of caste entrenchment, and because of which the intercaste marriages are increasing in the country. Right? Then, of course, there are more points which are possible here. I'm sure that some of you would have written that such intercaste marriages are only or are largely prevalent only in caste groups of similar status in the hierarchy, right? So it's not as if there's a larger distinction, the marriage is happening. So of course those points are there, but again, in a 10-mark question, there is lesser possibility for us to include a lot of a lot of counter viewpoints. All right. Then, however, there is a limited increase in inter-religious marriages. Irrespective of this, there's also inter-religious marriages which are not increasing at large. First thing is, religion is seen as a deeper attribute of identity. Religion is a stronger attribute of my identity as compared to caste. Why? Because my festivals, my behavior, my gods, everything is according to religion, and the caste might not have that much of an influence, right? So religion is something that people tend to protect a little bit more. Then, there are different civil codes in the country which create legal and cultural barriers. So I'm making a very practical point here, pragmatic point here. People might want to get married into a different religion, but because there are different codes that apply, it might create hurdles. Then both families and religious communities strongly oppose them and see them as a threat to cultural continuity. Even though caste is seen as intercaste marriage is also seen as a threat to cultural continuity, but again the breakage, the cleavage, the variance of culture is not that strong as compared to a religious conversion. Fair? Which is why these things, these inter-religious marriages, they tend to have a stronger rejection, right? Then tensions due to expectations of religious conversion. Now, I'm not saying tensions by or in whom. It might be within the couple, it might be in the family, it might be in the larger society. But what I'm saying is that there are tensions due to expectations of religious conversion. The couple may not want to convert at all. Neither person might be converting, but the society is acting against it, right? Then there's also growing political and religious polarization because of the circumstances around us. These interreligious marriages are also becoming are still difficult for people to execute. Of course, the examples here from current affairs data, all those things are applicable. Now, the next question was question number 10. This is, in dealing with socio-economic issues of development, what kind of collaboration between government, NGO and private sector would be most productive? This is the question in which your interpretation is being challenged. So let me stop the content discussion here and let's talk about the structures of the questions we've seen so far. Question number 5 is about migration, a topic that we tend to study quite often, right? It is in your general syllabus that is there. Everybody would have something about that in their notes, right? It's only that we have to put it in context of developing countries. Fair? So this question is fairly easy to handle. Then gender equality, equity, women's empowerment. With reasonable preparation, you should be able to write this because out of the lived experience, people do have the ability to write. Then intercaste marriages. Again, marriage is a topic everybody studies in their notes, which is why this also you could write. Of course, you might feel a little bit of difficulty if you've not written a question which is similar to this before, which means that I'll put it in the moderate zone. But this question about the linkages between NGO, government and private sector, this is something I concede, I agree with students that this feels more like a question from GS2, right? Wherein you have the topic of the development industry. However, you do know that there is a lot of overlap between social justice and all these topics in GS1, fair? Which is why it is necessary that we study these topics, these subjects in, in a holistic manner. If you break them down, it feels more difficult. Now, for this particular question, I see two types of structuring which is possible, right? They're saying, in dealing with these development issues, what kind of collaboration would be most productive? Which means they're asking what is the best way to do it? Which means that you could pick one way and talk about that for 2 pages, right? One type of structure is that you identify, say, public-private partnership as the best way and you talk about its merits, right? And perhaps demerits and why they don't matter as much as in one structure. But the structure that I'm picking here is one in which you're giving multiple strategies which can together work to be most effective, and I'm varying them, I'm choosing them according to the sector. Both of these structures are perfectly acceptable. What I'm saying is, as most productive, you can choose number one strategy, or you can give me a mix of strategies which will work. Today in this discussion, today here, I'm talking about multiple strategies which can work together. Fair? So do not get riled up about this particular question. So the first strategy that I'm talking about here is, first collaboration I'm talking about here is public-private partnership, which is that the government entity, the private entity, they work together to fund and implement a development project, right? So you can write the description of PPP that you study. And then what happens is private investment and public expertise is mixed together. Fair? And what does the NGO do? NGO brings in the need-based area, right? So NGO identifies the requirement. So for infrastructure development like highways, this works well. Next one is NGOs for on-ground implementation. For example, for rural health services, although the service provider might be private, the financer might be public, but to implement it on the ground, an NGO might work best. Fair? Then for policy advisory rules, whenever a policy has to be generated, right, the NGO, right, the private sector and the government should all participate and give their inputs for policy development. For example, for national education policy, naturally you can write any policy that you want to write here. Then for complementing government through CSR activities, whatever welfare development objectives the government might have, we can use the private sector also to support those support those objectives. Additionally, NGOs can facilitate the interlinkage. For example, the Tata CSR initiatives and the Tata NGOs which exist. Fair? Of course, you can give a specific name. Then for capacity building and training, for example, for Skill India Mission training, right? So you can have an NGO which is facilitating the linkage to the people who need to be trained, and there can be a private institution which is conducting the trainings. It can also be for shared technology and innovation, for delivery of Aadhaar services. You can share the technology from the government to a private sector. The private sector can provide the technology and the NGO can act as an interface. It can also be outcome based. If you need to do resource mobilization or for public awareness or for emergency services, for certain outcomes, it is necessary for all segments to collaborate with each other, right? Naturally, as I said, you can talk about these things separately, right? You can talk about these things as a mixture also. Fair? Now, this is the question in which I agree that some amount of thinking is necessary. Now, we are moving to the 15 markers. For 15 markers, the structuring becomes more important because we want to identify the 3 things that have been asked essentially. So question number 17 is the first one we want to discuss here. It reads, what is regional disparity? How does it differ from diversity? And how serious is the issue of regional disparity in India? 3 things, very clear 3 demands. First thing is, what is regional disparity? So I want you to define regional disparity, right? And you give an example. Fair? So it is unequal distribution of resources, wealth, development, all those things within a country. It can be because of different reasons, and it results in further disparity in social outcomes also, right? So you say things like that. Now, what is the difference between disparity and diversity? I'm giving the criteria at the center. So it differs in concept, nature, implication, the actions needed, and the focus it has. What is disparity? The concept says disparity is the imbalance in development and resource distribution. Whereas diversity is just the presence of various attributes. Of course, you give an example here, an example here. Example of disparity is of the different, say, employment opportunities, right? And diversity is the different types of employment that exist. Fair? The different types of jobs that are there. Then nature. Disparity highlights inequality, whereas diversity focuses on variety, right? Then implication. Disparity points to underlying issues which are there. Diversity points to positive attributes of society. Diversity is a positive thing that we're talking about, that we have such variety, which means that there is something positive happening in the society. If there is disparity, that means that there is some sort of injustice that is happening. So there's an underlying issue. Then what are the actions needed? For disparity, some correction is necessary through policy intervention or resource redistribution. For diversity, the action that is needed is we need to preserve it for cultural growth and mutual learning. So one culture can learn from the other. Then what is the focus? The focus of disparity is socio-economic inequalities, which is causing further development issues, right? And diversity ka focus is on socio-cultural heterogeneity, which can exist even in balanced regions, which means that presence of disparity means that we have to focus on it and fix it. Presence of diversity is something that should be there. It can be there even when there is no development issue. Fair? So we can generate these sort of differences according to these criteria. Please don't worry. After the discussion, I will move apart and I'll let you take screenshots of the video of the background. Fair? The next question, the next part of this question is, how serious is the issue of regional disparity in India? Right? So here they're saying, what are the elements of regional disparity in India, and whether or not it's very, very serious. So I'm saying that yes, there is there is perceptible regional disparity in the country. It is there in economic imbalance. For example, there is high industrialization, per capita income and employment in states like Maharashtra and Gujarat. Then we have poverty and migration from states like Bihar and UP. Where the nature of economic activity also varies. Agrarian northern states in Gangetic plains, right, have certain types of economic activities, whereas there is diversified economies of the west and the east because of different opportunities that are available there. Then infrastructure, ports and roadways in coastal states attract investment, but inland states suffer further loss of developmental opportunity because of the lack of infrastructure, right? Then social development. There is higher literacy rate and life expectancy in states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu. But pre-existing challenges lead to further social inequalities in states like Bihar and Jharkhand. Naturally, it is possible that you draw a map here, right? And you're able to mark these areas there also. Fair? So that could act as value addition. Now, the other things that you can write here is that there is also the impact of this unequal growth, right? So you can talk about the impact, you can talk about the future challenge also, right? But they're saying how serious is the issue. So here I'm taking the road of saying that yes, it is very, very serious, right? You can also break it down into yes, it is serious, no, it is not as serious, right? But there is not enough content for us to write about no, it is not as serious, right? Which is why we're selecting this aspect of this interpretation of the question. Then next question was question number 18. Despite comprehensive policies for equity and social justice, underprivileged sections are not yet getting the full benefits of affirmative action as envisaged by the Constitution, and you have to comment. Whenever there is a comment question, as we keep discussing in your test series, you know that comment means that it is an open-ended question. You get to pick what comment you're making, right? But what precedes it is something which is fixed. They're saying, despite there being a lot of measures for creating equity and social justice, it is not happening in the country, right? So first I say what the comprehensive measures are. That is where I'm beginning my answer from. And we're talking about the underprivileged section, which means that the idea of what constitutes underprivileged section is something that you get to choose. So what are the comprehensive measures that are there? You have constitutional mandates for scheduled castes, tribes, other backward classes. Please, you must remember that we have a habit of including the article, right, and the commission next to all of these underprivileged sections. We have affirmative action, for example, the reservation policy. We have schemes for social welfare, right, like the public provident fund and so on. Then you have religious minorities, senior citizens, transgenders, and Divyangjan, for whom also comprehensive measures have been taken by the Ministry of Social Justice. Fair? So all of these are constitutional and other affirmative actions which are there. Fair? Then my first argument is that yes, the benefits are not reaching the underprivileged, right? And here we are giving the reasons why. Because there is inequitable access to education despite these affirmative policies in the foundational learning phase of the child. There is a inequitable access to education. Because of these, those learning gaps are never filled. Then there is lack of awareness and information for the constitutional benefits that are existing. There is persistent social discrimination, stigma that is associated with certain identities. There are economic barriers because of which people cannot fund their health and education and other developmental inputs. There is dominance of affluent subsections. What we are saying here is that there are certain subsections within those underprivileged groups who are taking away all of the benefits. So when we were talking about the creamy layer in even the scheduled castes, this is the part of the argument that we are making. Then there is also politicization of the affirmative action. All of these interventions tend to become a part of vote bank politics, because of which their benefits are often squandered. Then there is also geographical disparities. Despite the understanding of underprivileged sections, there is still a variety of other disruptions that are there. Things like geographical disparities, the problem of exclusion, the problem of distance, which exists in the northeastern states, and say for tribals which live in remote areas. So all those arguments we are making here. Again, I'm giving you 8 arguments. If you've written 6, it's perfectly fine. I am sure that you would want to include examples here. Those examples vary with the interpretation that you're following. Now, for your comment portion, I'm giving you the paragraphs that you can make. First paragraph that you can make is, what are the causes behind these reasons? What are the structural causes because of which we are unable to solve it? Which means that it is more of a description further of the problem. Another part of your comment could be, what is the impact? What do we expect is going to happen in the future? And you can also talk about the suggested measures. The sort of suggested measures you could make could be reminiscent of what we were writing in a previous question about the collaboration between NGOs and private sector. Right? So we can talk about privatization of the welfare sector also. We can talk about the impact that is going to be in the future, the further, say, technology divide and the disruptions which might be caused, right? All those things you can write in your comment. There you get complete freedom, right? It is an open-ended question. The next question we had was question 19. Again, a very, very interesting question. It reads, globalization has increased urban migration by skilled, young, unmarried women from various classes. How has this trend impacted upon their personal freedom and relationship with the family? So, in the introduction, naturally, you're going to talk about globalization and migration and perhaps some data. But what I want to focus here is, what is the argument structure that has to be followed? Argument structure is that we have some sort of outcome of globalization and urbanization, right? Globalization has created urban migration because of which women are migrating. So because of all this, something would have happened in the life of women, fair? So some outcome of globalization, urbanization. Then I need to talk about the impact on personal freedom, and we need to talk about the impact on relationship with the family. In this particular question, again, you could have choices of different structures. I'm writing it down because it got a little complicated. You can talk about, B means body paragraph. So body paragraph 1 can be elements of globalization and urbanization. You can list them down separately, right? Then you talk about the impact of these elements on personal freedom of the girl, and then impact on relationship with the family. Fair? That is one way of addressing it. The second way could be globalization and migration of women as the first paragraph, then impact of all this on freedom and family together, right? So freedom and family together, and what suggested measures you're making. Both of these structures are fine, but for the purpose of discussion, I'm talking about the element, outcome, and the impact all together. The upper one is for personal freedom, and at the lower rung, we are talking about relationship with family. Okay? So what happens is, first, there is increased economic independence, right? Because of globalization, there is urban migration. Women are becoming economically independent. Because of that, what will happen? The woman will have autonomy in life choices, right? She gets to make her own decisions. What happens because of that is that they have the freedom to own their own housing, vehicle, and reproductive choices. So for personal freedom, the woman gets to own whatever it is that they want. They can live in their own house, they can use their own vehicles, they can make their own reproductive choices, relationship choices. In terms of family relationships, the woman gets to support the family income, right? So they can be the breadwinner for the family, and they can exercise independence of lifestyle choices, which was earlier being dictated by the family norms, right? So this is what we're talking about in terms of family, personal freedom and family relationships. Right? The second change that happens is their career opportunities get expanded. Right? In the urban sphere, there is a larger variety, there is a larger range of economic opportunity for women. Because of that, they get to challenge traditional gender roles at the workplace. Right? If there is a larger opportunity, they get to seize that opportunity and bring in a different role. What happens for the personal freedom of the woman? She will have to face glass ceilings, pink collarizations, and prejudices. If you're trying to do something new, you are going to face backlash, right? So that thing could happen. So their personal freedom is at a new frontier, is what we are saying. Then she may reconsider their role in the family as well. Because of what is happening in the work sphere, they might fall into the same thought process in the family. I'm not saying whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that that element is possible. So in our analysis, we are starting from a secular view and then we are going to break it down. So I'm starting with a neutral outcome which is going to happen. I can write the variance in the example, right? So if a woman gets a lot of freedom, right, she gets to have her own career opportunity, which means that she can challenge and select a different career choice that she wants. Now, because of this, that feeling might translate into family, and there in the family, she may make certain choices. Then, there will also be higher autonomy in relationships. Now, see, we say that the points have to be in a logical order. First, we say she has economic independence. Then we say she has career independence. Because of these two things, she gets autonomy in her relationships. Because of which, one outcome is delayed marriage, right? Because of that, what is there? There is both risk and reward of freedom of choice in partner. What that means is, if a woman gets a lot of freedom of autonomy in selecting her relationships, there is a certain risk that is associated, right? She might make the wrong choices. For example, the multiple instances of murders by boyfriends and partners in the past year, right? Then there is also a lot of reward which is possible, which is protection from a bad relationship and the possibility of a good one for the woman. Fair? Then for the family relationship, what happens here is, because she's exercising so much autonomy in relationships, then there is a wider generation gap between the family and the girl. And there is a variance in degree of acceptance of the new norms, meaning that the family can vary a lot in how much they are accepting or not accepting this new situation, right? So there could be a higher variance. Then the social network and peer group also changes when a woman is living in the urban area, right? So it goes beyond kinship and neighbors. Earlier, when there was lesser globalization, when women were not migrating, their peer group was often more prominently comprised of kinship and neighboring, close by friends, right? But now that social interaction is increasing. So what happens for the personal freedom? There is a possibility of wider social network, right? So a woman can have the opportunity of making more relationships, friends, associates, colleagues, everything. But there is also a risk of loneliness because of the loss of filial protection. I'm saying both things are there. Just because a woman has the freedom of choosing her own relationships, it does not discount for the aspects of introversion and extroversion and personality, right? That means that the woman may have the possibility of a wider social network, right? There is that possibility that you know a lot of people, but at the same time, it could also happen that you're in the city and you don't know anyone. It could also feel like you have lost the protection of your family around you, right? And your neighbors and your known ones. So that is an aspect. In terms of relationship with the family, there is reduced pressure on the family for fulfilling all of the social needs. If the girl was with the family, if the girl was within the family in a smaller structure, then all of the social needs of the woman had to be fulfilled by the family. Now those aspects have been outsourced to other peer groups, right? Then other dimensions you could talk about is, because of these things, the woman's political activism could change. Of course, her consumer choices, so the Nikefication of the society, their expenditure on certain luxury products will change. And again, the family's understanding of where that money has to be spent. Then demographic variance is going to be there. If there is so much migration of young, skilled and unmarried women in the city, so the sort of infrastructural changes that the cities have to make, the sort of security they have to establish, the sort of urban infrastructure they would want to create is going to change because of the demography that is there. Additionally, there is also that aspect of abandoned parents, who might be left behind, right? Again, it could also be that the sort of infrastructure that is required is not just for this, it could also be for other roles that women are playing in the household, all of the domestic labor that is there. There can also be higher conflict of social values. So an argument that we talk about when we see and discuss about the issues of rape and the prevalence it has in the society, it has to do with, there is a higher sort of contradiction or a higher contrast in the value system of two groups which are residing in the same area, which means that this young unmarried skilled, right, newly urban migrated woman might have a perception of her freedom which may clash with the expectations from the norms of someone else with a narrower mindset in the region, and they can have displaced aggression. So that conflict of social values could exist, right? It could create problems for either group. Fair. So this is the answer that we are writing, and these are the possible structures that are there. The next and last question we have to talk about is critically analyze the proposition that there is a high correlation between India's cultural diversity and marginalization and socio-economic marginalities. Again, let's talk about the structure first. Of course, in the first thing we have to write is India is a diverse country. What are the aspects that are possible here? Because it's a critically analyzed question. So one can be Indian diversity is there. You can describe Indian diversity. Then you can talk about India also have socio-economic marginalization. You can say that yes, there is high correlation, and then you can say no, there is unrelated trends, that they don't have that correlation. One way of writing the answer. Second way of writing is you talk about diversity and marginalization together. Then you talk about high correlation, and then you make a paragraph about unrelated, no correlation. Fair? So you get to choose those structures. Let's talk about content. First, you talk about cultural diversity in India. This is something that everybody would have prepared for society. It's from your first chapter. Use this question as an opportunity to showcase as much content as you can about the topic. Fair. So it has to do with language. So we have 22 official language, 1600 dialects. So such information is helpful here, static information, but you use it to enrich your answer. In terms of religion, we are home to major religions, birthplace of Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. We have caste and jati cultural diversity. Again, we're talking about cultural diversity. So caste is there. We have over 3,000 jatis, not limited to Hindus. Geographically also, we have very, very varied. So we're divided into regions, climatic zones, agroclimatic zones, which reflect in our culture. Ethnicity, we have racial diversity classified into Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Dravidian categories. So you can display the content that you have, that you've prepared for that particular topic in the beginning of your society notes. Then let's talk about the opinion which is there. Yes, there is a high correlation, and no. I'm writing that in one paragraph. Of course, you get to break it into two. So yes, there is a high correlation because there is historical discrimination which is there. There is caste hierarchy, because of which that cultural diversity translates into marginalization today. There is also geographic isolation of tribes. The tribes have lived in such isolation that that diversity is a reason because of which they are marginalized, because of which the development could never reach them. There are socio-economic disadvantages for linguistic minorities. It will be difficult for them to access healthcare and social services because they cannot talk in the language of the majority. There is intersectionality of marginalization. A woman who's a Dalit who's living in a tribal area, right? Again, socio-economic intersectionality. Then economic hardships for religious minorities, right? When they're already a religious minority, it could be that they face a difficulty in acceptance into jobs, because of which their marginalization becomes perpetuated. Then we can also say no, that no, there is no strong correlation. For example, there is the economic success of some minorities, for example, the Parsi community. Then government policies and affirmative actions have addressed these marginalizations. So, example, the reservation policies. Then, cultural diversity is unrelated to marginality. For example, Kerala has a lot of diversity, right, in terms of the social practices, in terms of the different subgroups that exist. But it has strong indicators of education and development and per capita income, all those things. Then, there is also provisions of urbanizations and economic mobility. The country does have the freedom of movement, because of which, even if you are in a region of geographic isolation, you can move, right? Then there are also regional development initiatives which have worked out, because of which we cannot say that there is a high correlation between cultural diversity and marginalization. In this particular question, for you to write the counter view is very important, because please remember, as future officers, it is your job, your honor, your duty to protect the name of the country. So our diversity is something which is a positive thing. Fair? And again, you've written that in another answer. We've talked about diversity and disparity. So because this is about diversity, we have to defend diversity. All right. So these were the questions that were there. I'll see you again in another subject at another time. I hope this was helpful. I hope you were able to write. And as usual, And again, more with every passing year and with every batch. You have all of our best wishes. You have all of our blessings. I hope you do well. Thank you.
Hello and good morning to all. So GS Mains paper 1 we are discussing, and this I am going to discuss this physical geography or the geography section. The first question that we are seeing here, it is what is sea surface temperature rise and how does it affect the formation of tropical cyclone. Now why this question was expected, because there are some incidents that we have seen. The unusual behavior of the cyclones, especially there was one cyclone that was originated in Indian Ocean. It was Freddy. In this cyclone, it took 3 landfalls in the Madagascar. It traveled somewhere around 7,000 kilometers of the distance in Indian Ocean, way back from Australia to reach in the Madagascar region. So why this unusual behaviors are there? That is because of the sea surface temperature is increasing. Now, what is this? Here the two parts are there in this question. One is what is sea surface temperature. So it is, you must be sure of this one. That is, if the sea water in its shallow depths, right? Let's say at shallow depths, its temperature, if it is increasing day by day, that is we are seeing. So this increase in temperature is known as sea surface temperature. Usually we take this shallow depths of 60 to 70 meter in terms of cyclones. So for the cyclones, we need this 60 to 70 meter of the depth, and if it is warm, if its temperature is high, then this is the best suitable condition for the cyclones to form. Okay. Now, you must be sure of this one, that is the carbon, which is concentration of this carbon dioxide and carbons is increasing continuously after especially the Industrial Revolution. So there was one report of UNFCCC. It was its 5th assessment report, in which it was highlighted that this is the oceans which are absorbing around 90% of the heat which is caused by this increasing concentration of carbon. It means we can safely now say the oceans are acting as the carbon sinks. Yes. Now what happens is, as we are increasing this carbon, the two things are changing, especially in case of ocean. Number one, the concentration of CO2 is being absorbed because they are acting as carbon sink. Secondly, the temperature of this oceans also is increasing, right? Now, according to this potential, if we talk about, let's say this is one side, we have the oceans which are acting as carbon sink. The second side, we have the atmosphere where the CO2 has been released. So compared to atmosphere, the potential of the oceans to absorb this increasing heat is 1000 times. Okay. Now what happens is, because of this tremendous potential, most of the heat which is caused by especially anthropogenic activities, let's say industrial emission, vehicle emissions, especially I'm talking about from 1970s. So this, most of the heat is absorbed by the oceans. So this is how the oceans are warming up. And especially after 1970s, this warming phenomena has been noticed very rampantly across the oceans. And you will be surprised that if we take this Indian Ocean, let's say this is Indian Ocean. Now, in 2020, that is, I'm taking the year of 2020, in Bay of Bengal, the temperature was recorded, it was 33 to 34 degrees C. And this was the highest ever recorded temperature in the open seas. Okay. And therefore, what happens is intensity of the cyclones will increase. We will see that how it is going to be increased. Now, from 1970s onwards, the 1.1 degree temperature rise has been expected. Means on an average, every ocean or the continents on an average, they are facing this rise of temperature by 1.1 degrees C. But in case of Indian Ocean, that is a different picture. Especially the western waters of the Indian Ocean, that is the Arabian side, is getting warmer at around 1.4 degrees C. That is way more than 1.1 degrees C temperature rise. That is the global average. So that is the reason nowadays you may have seen many of the cyclones are originating from this area. Otherwise, they were going into this way. But nowadays, they also turn in this India's coastline. Okay. So the example, if I give you, in 2021, there was one cyclone that was Taute. And this Taute was a kind of cyclone which created some devastating impacts for India also. Yes. So this is about the background. Now the second aspect is we have learned what is the sea surface temperature rise and why it is rising, because the carbon sink performance of the oceans, right? Now how it is going to affect the formation of tropical cyclone. This is very interesting case. Now you should be very aware of this phenomena of tropical cyclone. What are tropical cyclone? There are certain conditions which are required for the tropical cyclones to form. For example, now say here, if I explain this formation, let's say this is the continent, here it is the continent. Now we are taking this side, it is the ocean. Now for the tropical cyclones to form, these are the conditions that are favorable condition. The first one is you need high SST, sea surface temperature should be more than 27 degrees C, and this usually is required for 60 to 70 meter of the depth. This is the first condition. The second condition is why this temperature is required in this one, because it is the evaporation which is caused by this temperature. Due to the evaporation, what will happen? The water vapor will be generated. This water vapor will reach into the atmosphere, right? The more supply in the atmosphere will be more conducive for what? Will be more conducive for, see here now, let's say the water vapor is reaching into the atmosphere. The warm is the oceanic surface. Now what will happen? The air which come in contact with this warm oceanic surface, it will expand. Its molecules will be dispersed and therefore it will become lighter. The lighter warm air therefore will rise. And when this is rising, this will rise with intensity, right? And therefore what will happen? The convective cell will be established here. Convection will start over this water body, right? If the temperature is more than 27 degrees centigrade. Now, when the water vapor is reaching into the upper atmosphere, it will lose its temperature. You may be aware of this normal lapse rate of 6.5 degrees C per kilometer would be the drop in temperature if 1 kilometer this water vapor is uplifted. Okay. Now, when the upliftment was started, the moisture is now getting cooled off, means it is cooling process which has been started. With this cooling, what will happen? Latent heat of condensation will be released into the atmosphere and therefore atmosphere become warmer. So what is happening? You can see here the heat from this surface area is now going to be transferred into the upper atmospheric layers with the help of this latent heat of condensation. And because of this continuous heat supply in the form of latent heat of condensation, atmosphere becomes warmer and warmer. Therefore, it is inducing low pressure conditions. You must be familiar with this one. If the temperature is increasing here, what happens? The atmospheric warm layers will go up. Therefore, the pressure will be released. So, in a way, this latent heat of condensation is conducive for low pressure conditions here. Yes or no? Yes. And because of this atmospheric, let's say, latent heat of condensation, low pressure will be strengthened. And if the low pressure is strengthened, what is the tropical cyclone? Tropical cyclone is nothing but whenever you have the low pressure on water body, the winds will be attracted from all the sides to fill this low pressure. When they will reach into this low pressure area, because of high temperature, what will happen? They will eventually converge, and while converging, they will make a spiral flow. Okay, and therefore the winds will rotate around this low pressure, creating a kind of cyclonic move. Okay. Now, what is the question? The question was asking, the demand of question is how this temperature which is increasing in the superficial area of the water is conducive for tropical cyclone formation. So now see here, there are other conditions are also required, but now our focus is, because the question is focusing on the temperature. So how the temperature? So if the temperature will increase, the first dimension is more would be the evaporation. The second point is, if the more is the evaporation rate, moisture will be added into the atmosphere, it will also increase. If the moisture will increase, what will happen? Atmosphere will have more supply of latent heat of condensation. If the latent heat of condensation has been supplied more, what will happen? It will strengthen low pressure conditions over the water, and it will further enhance the tropical cyclone. Now, what is the clear relationship between temperature and this cyclone formation. Now see here, if the temperature is increasing, it is supporting all these 1, 2, 3 and 4 factor, and all these 4 factors are very important for any cyclone to form. Yes. One more thing, if more is the temperature in this water body, over this water body, more stronger and vertical flow of the air would be there. So when we say, let's say, now see here, when we say, if I just want to erase some area, see here. Yes. So whenever we say that cyclone must be, what does it mean? See here now. For the strong cyclones, see here, this is the water surface. The convective system is very powerful. Now what happens is condensation will start, cumulonimbus cloud will be formed, cumulonimbus cloud is going to be formed. Here it is I center, means here there would be no convection. So this condensation is, if the rapid upliftment is there of the warm and moist air, means it is a kind of unidirectional flow of the air from this bottom to the top, then we will say there is no vertical wind shear. What is the meaning of wind shear? That there is a particular definite direction of the wind is there, and it is not getting disturbed. Means it is not going in this here and here, in this here and here direction. It is going straight in the up direction. So we will say, if the stronger would be the temperature here, stronger is the low pressure formation here, it will support no disturbance in the vertical rise of air. And that is one more condition which is going to be suitable for the tropical cyclones, right? So the fifth dimension that we are adding here now, see here, in the fifth dimension, we have seen this 4 dimension. Fifth would be, it will ensure vertical flow of warm and moist air. Warm and moist air. And because of all these conditions, your tropical cyclones are going to be very, very powerful and in terms of their intensity. Now I have 2-3 examples. Let me discuss with the help of examples. So the question was focusing, see here, the question was focusing, how does it affect? You are supposed to write all this 4-5 dimensions. Number 1, evaporation will increase. Second, more supply of the moisture will be added. Because of the moisture, it is the latent heat will be released into the atmosphere, and latent heat of condensation is known as fuel of the tropical cyclone. Moisture is known as fuel of the cyclone. Okay. Then 5 dimensions, you are done with this part. Now you have to provide some examples also. Without examples, your discussion is incomplete. Now see here, what is the examples for us? Number 1, see here. The example is, number 1, there was one cyclone, that is Amphan cyclone. Amphan was in 2020. The Amphan was of cyclone category 1. Okay, means it was cyclonic storm. Based on speed, this classifications are there. So this was of cyclone category 1, cyclonic storm they are known as. It reached into cyclonic category of 5, and this is nothing but your super cyclones. In less than 36 hours while it was passing through Bay of Bengal region. Why? Because at that time, Bay of Bengal region was having very high temperature. Yes, on the surface. Okay? Because of that reason, what happened is, while it was moving, let's say this is the cyclone, when it was moving over this Bay of Bengal's warmer water, more and more moisture was added from here, and therefore the formation of cyclone was supported with unprecedented scale. Therefore, what happened is, Amphan turned into a super cyclone in less than 36 hours. This is one concept that you can remember. Whenever the cyclone will pass over the warm water, it is known as accelerated cyclonic energy. So cyclone will gain the energy in the form of moisture, in the form of latent heat, and therefore this concept is known as ACE. Accelerated cyclonic energy. Okay, so because of this ACE phenomena, this turned into a super cyclone. Simple. The second and classical example that we do have, the next example, see here. In case of Indian Ocean, this is, let's say, India, and here in Indian Ocean, somewhere near the Australia, this is Australia. Just removing this one, see here. In case of, let's say, Australia, what happened is, here there was a cyclone which was generated. This name of the cyclone was Freddy in 2023. Now what happened is, it traveled somewhere around, this is the Africa, and here it is Madagascar. It traveled around 7,000 kilometers of the distance, and it sustained for 37 days in Indian Ocean to travel towards Madagascar. Now, how you can understand, how you can think about that, how can a cyclone can sustain for this 37 days? This was the longest ever surviving cyclone in the history of cyclones. It took 3 landfalls here for this cyclone to dissipate completely. Why this was so powerful? Why this was sustaining for 37 days? Because while it was moving over this Indian Ocean was warmer. And therefore, again, the concept of accelerated cyclonic energy comes into the picture. And in that way, you can put these 2 examples. One is of Amphan, second is of Freddy cyclone. And you can then conclude that this is because of these, all the reasons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we have discussed, evaporation, latent heat of condensation will increase. All these phenomena are supportive for the cyclonic storms. Okay, examples you have already given. So this is how you were supposed to write in question number 1, right? Second question, if we discuss, the second question is about cloudburst, right? This cloudburst was an expected question because there was a landslide in Kerala's Wayanad, and this was also caused because of a mini cloudburst there. So the question was expected either on the landslide or the second is, let's say, on the cloudburst. Now, cloudburst has, most of the students should be aware of this phenomena, that cloudbursts are nothing but in a very short period of time, very heavy rainfall if it is caused in a localized region, let's say of 15-20 square kilometer, localized it is, then it will be termed as the cloudburst. Means it is for that reason, in a very short period of time, if the huge rainfall is received, means it is beyond the capacity of that region. Therefore, it is often known as cloudburst. Now, this is one part. Okay? Cloudburst, many of the students would be aware of this phenomena. Now, but there are some technical differences also. Let's say I am taking one side, this is normal rainfall. The second side I am taking, let's say, cloudburst. So now see here. The one major difference is you have said that this would be heavy amount of rainfall, amount in a very short period of time, right? Short period of time. Then, now the second major difference is in the size of drops, the raindrops, size of the drops. Now, in case of cloudburst, what will happen? The size of the drop can reach 8 to 10 mm also. Okay? This is going to be the size of the drop. Whereas in case of the normal rainfall, it would be from 2 to 4 mm. And in case of heavy rainfall also, 4 to 6 mm of the raindrop is possible. Even in case of heavy rainfalls, this is the size of the drop. But in case of the cloudburst, it can go more than 6, you can say. Here, more than 6, you can write. More than 6 mm is going to be the size of the drop. Now, because of the size of the drop, heavier it is, it will also fall with some great velocity. And therefore, what will happen? This third dimension comes in here, that is the terminal velocity. What is the meaning of terminal velocity? The rate at which the drops are falling down. So, terminal velocity will be somewhere 10 meter per second. 10 meter per second. Whereas in case of the normal and in fact heavy rainfall, this is possible somewhere 6 meter per second of terminal velocity. Now, because of these two reasons, what will happen? When the larger drops are falling down with great speed, they will cause more pressure on the land surfaces. Yes or no? Yes. And therefore, the land surfaces, especially the slopes, especially the mountains, will become more vulnerable to landslide, mud flow, because of the impounding effect created by this large size of the drop. Now, overall, because of this, what will happen? The pounding effect will be more. Where the large drops are falling down, especially over the mountainous areas. See here, when the large drops, this is kind of mountain, right? So on this mountain, let's say this is the cloudburst. Because of the cloudburst, what happened is the drop of the size of the drop is more, number one. The second is their terminal velocity is also increasing. So what happens is, in a very short period of time, more volume of the water will fall down on the surfaces, and therefore these surfaces become so much vulnerable to the land erosion, or we can say here, therefore, landslides, mud flow, they become very common incidents. And we have seen in the recent past, in the Wayanad, what was the reason? Cloudburst was the reason. Now the third dimension, how it is different from the normal rainfall, the cloudburst. Now, because of this two reason, as much as 250 mm of rainfall in 1 hour is possible for a particular area. So what I'm saying is, in case of cloudburst, see here, in case of cloudburst, 250 mm of rainfall in 1 hour is possible. So this can go from 100 mm per hour to 250 mm per hour for a particular region. Whereas in case of the normal rainfall, this is going to be 30 mm per hour. Now, how much it is larger in terms of times? Can you see that? Normal rainfall will cause only 30 mm in 1 hour, whereas in case of the cloudburst, this can be in the range of 100 to 250 mm of hour. So these are the 4-5 dimensions that you must be familiar with. Okay. Otherwise, if you will write simply the heavy rainfall, it is not the justified answer. These are the various differences, right? This we have also covered in our GSAP classes in the ForumIAS, the cloudburst. Now see here, after discussing this was the cloudburst phenomena. Now why exactly this happens? That is the second dimension, because in the explain, you have explained the phenomena, how this is different. So 4 factors, 4 dimensions you have written. The 5th dimension is now how exactly these cloudbursts will occur. Now see here. Now let's say there is a huge mountain in terms of its height I'm saying. Okay, this is the height. Now what happens is, if there are warm and moist winds, let's say these are the warm and moist winds, because of this obstruction, what will happen? They may be uplifted rapidly. And because of this rapid upliftment, what happens is the clouds are going to be cumulonimbus cloud. Remember, whenever there is the upliftment at a very fast movement of the air, if it is there in the atmosphere, it will result into vertical cooling. And this vertical cooling will enable the cloud formation, and this cloud would be cumulonimbus cloud. Now what happens is, I am using some terminologies here. Number 1, it is temperature gradient. What is the meaning of temperature gradient? It is simply the change in temperature. So what I am saying is, if the temperature gradient is stronger here inside the cloud, means temperature is changing very quickly and rapidly inside the cloud, it will result into the formation of larger drop size. Formation of larger drop size. So the drop size will increase. The second is, for this much of the upliftment, it is the height of the mountains also which plays important role. So this we say orographic gradient. So 2 type of gradients are the main reason. This is orographic gradient, right? So because of the orographic gradient, that is, you can consider height factor. What happens is, this winds, warm and moist winds, can be uplifted for good amount of height, and therefore what will happen? Inside the cloud, temperature gradient will be more, and because of this gradient, drop size will increase, and thereby the phenomena of cloudburst will start in such regions. Means this is a common phenomena of high mountainous areas, especially you can consider Himalayas, right? Now in case of Himalayas, if I ask you a question, can you see this cloudburst phenomena? Answer would be definitely yes. Why? Because Himalayas are very high in terms of their height. Therefore, cloudburst phenomena are very common here. We have seen the incidents. For example, in Ladakh in 2010, what happened is, see here now. If I just explain you, this is how the cloudburst will occur. The 2 gradients are the main reason behind this cloudburst formation or cloudburst to occur. Okay. Now, after this, if I discuss, let's say, have you seen this type of phenomena in case of India? Yes, we have seen. In the Kerala, we have seen. In case of Ladakh also, we have seen. Now, what happened in way back 2010 in Ladakh? Ladakh witnessed the rainfall of 250 mm per hour. Now, for Ladakh, it is something which is very unusual. Let's say, max was 30-50 mm of hours rainfall that Ladakh was experiencing but this time it was 250 mm per hour. In the same way, in July 2020, see here, in the same way, in July 2020, now what happened in case of July 2020? This is, let's say, Himalayas. In the Himalayas, let's say this is Himalaya. Nowadays, one phenomena is very common, that is the western disturbances are now arriving in the months of April and May also. However, usually they should come till March. In the winters, they should come. But nowadays, because of global warming, here I would not discuss in depth because the question's demand is not there. What is happening? More and more western disturbances are visiting India in summers, number one. So they are now coming in summer, and the second is they are coming towards this mainland area. Okay? So the second is they are reaching into the mainlands. Now, because of this problem, now let's say it is the month of May and June. What will happen in the month of May and June? India may have the moisture inside because of this monsoonal winds, right? If what happens in the month of June, let's say the western disturbances are arriving, they will supply the moisture content. Yes or no? Yes. Now this moisture, along with the moisture which is supplied by southwest monsoonal wind, they can cause this type of cloudburst. Means the moisture supply, if it is going to be increased, what will happen? The rainfall and the precipitation will increase in terms of its volume, in terms of its intensity, in terms of its velocity. And therefore, the cloudburst phenomena will become very, very common. Day by day, they are becoming common. Now, this exactly incident occurred in case of Himachal Pradesh in the month of July 2020. And you know, Himachal Pradesh experienced 4 times higher rainfall than their annual long-term average. So this is their rainfall of 2020. Annual long-term rainfall was more than 4 times was received in this month of July 2020 in Himachal Pradesh. Same was also felt in case of Rajasthan. Twice was the rainfall compared to their annual long-term average. And for the Saurashtra Gujarat region also, the same twice was the rainfall compared to their long-term annual average. And this is how the rainfall or the cloudburst phenomena are becoming common day by day. The only thing that I am introducing here, why they are shifting more in the summer and towards the mainland area, means towards the lower tropics. It is because of global warming. Because of warming, what is happening? Arctic is becoming warmer. Due to the Arctic's warming, what happens is the pressure will be caused, and these western disturbances and jet streams will become more and more meandering, and they will shift towards India, or they will shift towards the tropics. Okay. So this is all about the cloudburst phenomena, what you could have written. So this is about cloudburst. Okay. The next question is, it is about demographic winter and how the world is moving towards this situation that is supposed to be explained in this question, right? Now, the first thing is, what is the background? The background is this term, demographic winter, was used by US policymakers to warn their, let's say, country, the impending crisis which is going to occur because of low birth rates in the countries. Now, what is the meaning of this one? Demographic winter, it is nothing but low birth rates. Low birth rates. So because of this low birth rate, the problem can be caused that can result into the social and political along with economic crisis. And this was something which was warned by US policymakers, and they use this term, that is demographic winter. In fact, there was one article in the Lancet that this even South Asia is moving towards this journey. Okay. So this is now a kind of global phenomena. Now, how you could have elaborated this thing, that this is the world is moving now towards this situation. You could have just put some of the examples. For example, if I take Europe. So Europe has the TFR, total for, let's say, fertility rate of 1.5. Whereas if you will see the special case of Spain inside, this is only 1.19 in case of Spain. If you will take the example of South Korea, the birth rate is only 0.7. In case of Japan, again, it becomes somewhere around 1.5. Yes. So this phenomena is now across the world has been noticed. And I mentioned for the South Asia also, this was predicted that South Asia is also moving towards the demographic winter. For India also, it is said that after 2050 or till 2050, we will also reach in this stage of demographic winter. Okay? We may see the reverse change. In case of India's increasing population, you may see the population will decline. After 2050, this was expected by Lancet. Now, how the world is moving towards this situation, you have written here, elaborate. So now in the elaboration, what you will write, number one, what are the causes and the consequences also you can mention briefly. So what are the causes of the situation which is being caused? Why the demographic winter is being caused? So there are multiple reasons. The first reason is, yes, of course, it is related to empowerment of women. Empowerment of women, where they are now more educated and they also want to participate in the labor, let's say, chain supply. So they are educated and they are working also. Now, most of the cases you will see nowadays the working population have also the participation of women, and which is now increasing day by day. So that is also the reason where women are now more educated, they are more working now. Therefore, they are preferring delayed marriages. After the delayed marriages, many of the couples are prefer not to have child. Now, why they are preferring not to have child? Number one, it gives them the sense of freedom. Freedom in terms of, for example, what type of the freedom? They can roam around and all these things, but here we are not going to write all these things. But here, what type of the problems which are being caused, especially there is inflation, which is ever increasing. Because of the inflation, everything, for example, considering the domestic expenses, considering the education related expenses, considering to the healthcare expenses, all the things are becoming more and more expensive. So the couples are not now going for many of the childs. Hardly they are going for one or max two childs, right? Children are nowadays decreasing in numbers because of this ever increasing inflation. Now, because of this awareness which is increasing in the society, this is the primary cause why the winter of the demography has been noticed. The second thing is natural reason. Because of the delayed marriage, what happens is now the pregnancy is becoming a kind of difficulty for the women. Okay? The sperm count will decrease, the ovulation count will decrease over the, let's say, some age group if you are crossing. So that is the natural problem which is occurring because of the delayed marriages, because of the delayed pregnancies. This is the natural thing. Now, these are the main reason. Okay, this is the causes. Now, how they can result into what are going to be the consequences? So the consequences can have, let's say, why this term was used by Americans, because they were warning this consequences of demographic winter. So what could be the consequences? Number one, for example, you can say there would be more elderly population. If the more is the elderly population, you need more geriatric care, right? It will be very expensive. So expenses will increase, medical bills will increase, pension bills will increase for the elderly population. Yes, so all these expenses are going to increase. Next is because demographic winter will create short supply of the labor, right, in future, because demography is not good enough to support this labor chains. Now what will happen? You will have more and more elderly people. Okay? Therefore, what will happen? You may have the shortage of labor. This shortage of labor will cause less economic production. Also, because of this short supply of the labor, what will happen? More load will be there. So they will be more under pressure. Okay? Under pressure. Secondly, whatever the labor is left, it is more under the pressure. Secondly, they will be aged also. Yes. So again, you will have to modify the work related condition. For the young people, it is not very difficult to manage. But for the elderly population, if they are the main working force, then they cannot operate under some difficult scenarios. You have to modify your work related conditions. You have to think about their healthcare and all these social welfare schemes. Pension related schemes are to be modified. In a way, what will happen if the demographic winter become permanent for some of the countries? What will happen? They will have very few people left in their country after, let's say, 40-50 years. This may cause political disturbance also there. Okay? So there are multiple, we can say, concerns. Social, it can be. Social pressure would be there. Their shortage of the labor will be there. there may be the economic burden may increase on, let's say, some people because of, let's say, the economic production will decrease. So all these can be the consequences. Here I will give you the two examples. Okay, what should be done in order to handle this demographic winter? So there are two classical case studies. One is of Hungary and the second is of South Korea. So you can give the examples, the case studies of Hungarian case study, where they are giving incentives to increase, let's say, if you have 2 or more than 2 children, then the government is providing so many incentives. They are taking care of the education expenses, healthcare related educations of the children. So in this way, they are promoting, that is, the incentives are being given by the country of Hungary. Second is the South Korea. So South Korea is offering all prenatal and antenatal healthcare related expenses along with the education also. So in a way, they are incentivizing more population, or we can say more birth rate in their respective countries. So you can write in this way that this phenomena, based on your given data, Europe we mentioned, Japan we mentioned, the Lancet report of Asia, for the South Asia also we have mentioned. So because of all these factors, this demographic winter is upcoming even for the South Asia continent. In this way, we have touched all the aspect of this question, right? Next one. So the next question is about groundwater potential of Gangetic Valley, and it is seriously declining. The question is mentioning that one, how may it affect the food security of India, right? Now, what is this groundwater potential? We have some permanent groundwater which remains in the aquifer. And this potential groundwater is nothing but your that supply of this permanent water in the aquifers. Okay. Now this is declining in the Gangetic Valley, and we have the two very important reports. One is, for the first time, Ministry of Jal Shakti conducted the water body and their census, and in that, one dynamic assessment of water resources was prepared by Ministry of Jal Shakti, and where it was found, I'm just reporting here the data. The first data is, that is dynamic assessment. By Ministry of Jal Shakti. So in this, they mentioned that India is the largest user of groundwater across the world. Means we are extracting so much and so on groundwater for our, let's say, domestic needs, for our agricultural need. The second thing that was mentioned, especially with respect to this Gangetic Valley, there they mentioned that most of the regions inside this Gangetic Valley regions have been exploited in such a manner that they have reached to tripping stage. What is the meaning of tripping stage? Means now anything can happen. Means if you will just extract some more water, permanent depletion of the water will be there in that particular region. So most of the regions are now operating at their tripping points. Tripping points means you are now at their peak, right? We are exploiting this water resources and they have reached to their peak of, let's say, exploitation. That is mentioned by this dynamic assessment resource which was formed by Ministry of Jal Shakti. I remember there was one report which was for the first time WMO has ever formed, that was global assessment of water resources, and in that one especially they mentioned that is this Gangetic basin of India is now also under a threat, where the groundwater potential is decreasing alarmingly in this India's Gangetic Valley. Okay, so because of this data, the one thing is very clear in front of us, that is, yes, the potential, that is the groundwater potential of India has been diminishing continuously, right? Now the second part of the question is saying why, what could be the serious, let's say, the impacts in terms of our food security. Now before going into that one, you could have just with this data, you could have written that why this is depleting, because this Y dimension is also inherent inside this first part. So why this is decreasing, we could have just, let's say, wrote this part in this manner, the causes of depletion. So causes you can divide into two main categories. One is anthropogenic, means because of the human beings. The second you can say because of hydroclimatic factors. hydroclimatic factors. For example, in the hydroclimatic factor, it is the climate change. Now, you know, if the climate change is there, the first one, the very, we can say the indicator of this climate change would be the water. Water will indicate you. Groundwater will be depleted. Surface water will be evaporated. The oceanic water will be boiled up and the oceans are acidifying. The climate change will be reflected by heavy rainfall, cloudburst. So it is the water which is the first kind of indicator of the climate change. So because of this climate change, what is happening? The rainfall patterns are being disturbed. Rainfall patterns are being disturbed. Its intensity may be depleting. Okay? Sometimes the droughts are caused because of this climate change. Droughts are there. The rainfall and all other climatic factors are also contributing to seasonal flow of rivers here. Right? Seasonal flow of river means after the monsoon season, after let's say some particular months, even the Ganga will witness lesser flow. Yes. So because of that, what is happening? The climatic factors are playing their role. Next is in this hydroclimatic potential. The second thing is how aquifers are getting charged. Right? So the aquifers are now permanently getting depleted because of overexploitation. And what happens is, for example, in this, let's say, why the aquifers are getting damaged. Let's say this is one aquifer where the water was stored. Now we have exploited the entire water. Now what is happening? Often the subsidence of the land has been seen in such areas where we are extracting the groundwater in a kind of increasing rate. So because of this subsidence of the land, what will happen? This aquifer will be permanently closed. And therefore, what is happening? Less number of aquifers we are left with. Okay. So in this side, you can say it is the cycle of aquifer recharge, the climatic factors, all they are playing their role. The second side, the major side is anthropogenic. So what is happening in this Gangetic Valley? For example, if I show you, that is, see here, we can say this is the plains of Ganga. From here, you can consider from Punjab, Haryana, UP, Bengal, you can add Bihar, Jharkhand also. So this entire stretch is the part of this Gangetic plain where most of the population is dependent on the agriculture because of the agriculture potential of this area is too much, right? Anthropogenic. For example, here in the Punjab and Haryana, we launched our green revolution. So because of the green revolution, what happened is, see here the green revolution. Because of the green revolution, what happened is indiscriminate was the use of fertilizers. Because of this fertilizers, what happened is the soil fertility got eroded. Soil fertility got eroded. Also because of the fertilizers, aquifers were polluted, right? So this is the reason where because of the green revolution, the water demand was increased. Why? Because we ignored agroclimatic choices of the crop. What is the meaning of agroclimatic choices? For example, in the region of Rajasthan, if I am growing, let's say sugarcane, it is a water guzzling crop which needs more water. And Rajasthan is not agriculturally suitable. The climate of Rajasthan is not suitable for this crop. But still I am using the waters from, let's say, Indra Canal, and still I am growing the sugarcane in that area. Then what will happen? It will result into the salinity problem there. Water guzzling it is. So more amount of water is now channelized towards this crop, right? So in this way, in this green revolution, this agroclimatic choices of the crop was ignored and water guzzling crops. For example, in the Punjab, we were growing, let's say, the wheat, Haryana wheat, yes, sugarcane and all these crops. So because of that, what is happening? The demand of water was increasing, and to meet this ever increasing demand of the water, the groundwater was exploited in an unprecedented rate, right? So that is the problem. Then we are also indulge in over exploiting. We have seen more than, let's say, 85% of this groundwater is being utilized in the irrigation. So for the irrigation, mostly we are using this groundwater only. Yes or no? Yes. Then we also now are not following this recycling approach, means we are not allowing this aquifers to recharge because of our rate of exploitation is more than the charging rate or the recharging rate of the aquifers. Because of all these problems, what is happening? It is the primary role which is being played by human beings also. Next is the institutional role. For example, our policies are slightly skewed. For example, in the Punjab, you will see electricity for the farmers is heavily subsidized. It is almost free. So continuously they are pumping out this groundwater in their crops. Yes or no? Yes. So this is the policy related issue. The next policy related issue is to provide MSP. Yes, na? We are not providing for MSP enough for such crops which are less intensive in terms of their need of water. Yes. So our policies are also slightly skewed. Then the next problem is the proper management of the groundwater and its resources is not taken care of. Policy related also, we have so many issues in the management of such areas. The water management in such areas is highly ineffective. So because of all these reasons, increasing population is the another problem where the demand of water is continuously increasing. We have seen recent year in the Delhi there was the problem of drinking water. There was the case of Bangalore also. In that way, the entire this Gangetic plains are now going through this acute shortage of the drinking water also nowadays, right? So because of all these reasons, what is happening, our aquifers are continuously under great pressure. So this severe negligence, overpopulation, over exploitation, they all are slightly or slowly moving all our resources to the peak of their vulnerability in terms of their exploitation. And therefore, this entire Gangetic plain is under severe pressure, right? So we have seen the, let's say the causes. Now, what is going to be the effect? As I mentioned here, mostly the groundwater is being used in the irrigation. And what is the effect on food security therefore then? Now see here. The second dimension of the question is, yes. Now see here. The second dimension, what would be the effects in terms of our food security? How the food security will be impacted. Number one, the agriculture, which is using 85% of groundwater resources, that agriculture sector is going to be severely affected. Yes or no? Yes. Therefore, what will happen? We will expect lesser food production. And there would be multiple dimensions of this lesser food production. Yes or no? Social problem, economic problem, right? Many of the women which are who are employed in this agricultural field, their, let's say, income will be affected severely. So this is how we are going to use this agriculture sector is going to be most affected because of this groundwater which are depleting. The second thing is the changing climatic, that is I mentioned here, hydroclimatic situations. So hydroclimatic factors are playing their role. Because of this hydroclimatic factors also, what is happening in overall agricultural production is decreasing. For example, you may have remembered that in India put a kind of complete ban on the export of wheat. Why? Because of this climatic patterns which were changing. The wheat cultivating areas, let's say Punjab and Haryana, the western disturbances were not arriving in India, means their intensity and frequency was disturbed and disrupted. In especially in the month of February 2023, we did not receive any western disturbance. So what happened is, therefore, we are expecting due to this climatic factors, our wheat production is going to fall down. And therefore, we had to put nothing but ban on the export of wheat. Yes or no? Yes. So in this way, our agriculture is going to be affected. Next is what happens is we are exploiting the groundwater. In that way, what is happening? Many of the pollutants are now getting mixed with our groundwater. Okay? The salinity is increasing. So because of this salinity's problem, what is happening? The salinity in the soil is increasing day by day because of the irrigation or over irrigation. Especially we have seen in case of Punjab. Nowadays, Punjab is going through very less production in terms of agriculture. Why? Because of increasing salinity problem in the Punjab soil. So overall, the food production will fall down. So in this way, it is going to affect our food production in a short future, right? Then the next factor also you can use here. The population is increasing. Now you have the two aspects. One is the agriculture. The second is drinking water need, where you will channelize your groundwater resources. So in future, if the population will grow in the same way, what will happen? The agriculture sector may receive slight less water. What is as of now is being received 85%. Let's say in the future more, if the population, the agriculture sector may use 70% of this groundwater. So what will happen? Overall production will fall down. So in a way you can mention these are going to be the impacts on our food security. Okay, fine. So next question is, what are Aurora australis and Aurora borealis? How are these triggered? Okay, now see here. The first thing is you will define this aurora. What is aurora? These are nothing but cosmic glowing lights. Cosmic glowing lights which are seen or which are formed in polar regions. Polar regions, that is, in the North Pole region, they are known as Aurora borealis, and in the Southern Pole region, they are known as Aurora australis. Okay, so they are nothing but cosmic glowing lights, and they are formed in the polar regions only. Why they are going to be formed? That is the now mechanism. Why they are going to be formed? So here certain things you should be familiar with after writing this one. See here, this is the Earth, and you may be aware of this one, that Earth has the geomagnetism properties. Yes, because of that, what happens is the geomagnetic poles near the actual poles, this is the geomagnetic pole. Here the magnet of the Earth is stronger. Magnetosphere we are talking about. Now see here, what happens is when the solar radiation, that is in the form of insolation, let's say this is the sun, the solar radiation, when they come in this powerful magnetosphere here, so many of the photons will be trapped in this region, right? So the two factors are involved here. Number one is the insolation, that is the sunlight. Second is the magnetosphere of the Earth. Now see here, I am erasing this part in order to introduce some more things. See here now. After these two factors, the one thing that you should be familiar with, see here now. This is the surface of the Earth. Now up to 80 kilometer that I am taking is mesosphere. This is up to mesosphere. This is at the altitude is of somewhere 80 kilometer from the Earth's surface we are talking about. Now at this altitude, what happens is the atmosphere remains denser. And here you will find the concentration of N2 somewhere 78%. Oxygen somewhere 21 point something percent, argon 0.09, and CO2 in the form of 0.03 in terms of their concentration. So here evenly these gases are mixed, and everywhere you will find this concentration is true. Okay? There are however exception. For example, ozonosphere, you will find more concentration of ozone, but here you will find more or less even distribution. After this particular height, the distribution becomes different, and here it is known as heterosphere. Heterosphere will have in the bottom nitrogen in the molecular form, oxygen in the atomic form, helium, and then hydrogen in the upper part. Based on their weight and due to the gravity, the nitrogen is there in the bottom because of it is heavier among all four. Then it is oxygen, then helium, and then it is hydrogen. This is nothing but we are talking about thermosphere. Thermosphere is divided into two. One is ionosphere and the second is exosphere. From 80 to 640, this is ionosphere. In this ionosphere, we have this arrangement. Now what happens is here, we are talking about this magnetosphere in the region of ionosphere of Earth. In the upper atmosphere, it has been ionosphere. In this ionosphere, there is nitrogen and there is oxygen. Okay, in the form of nitrogen is molecular, oxygen is atomic. Now what happens is this photon energy which was trapped by the strong magnet here, what will happen? This energy will be absorbed by this nitrogen and oxygen. Because of this absorption of energy, what will happen? They have now heat energy with that. This heat energy absorbed by any of the object will be radiated back, yes or no? Yes. So what happens is this heat energy, when it is radiated back by this nitrogen and oxygen molecules which are present here, this will be produced in the form of light. So this heat is radiated back in the form of light, and this light that you can see in the magnetosphere of Earth, in the ionosphere layer, especially over the polar regions in both the sides, these are known as cosmic lights, that is nothing but aurora. They are also referred as polar lights. Why? Because they are formed in the polar region, one pole and the second pole. Why? Because magnetosphere is very powerful here. So how this mechanism is triggered, you should be now very careful with this. Now see here, the one thing is, what are the various factors which are in the role? Number one, it is the solar radiation. Solar radiation. The second role is played by magnetosphere of the Earth. Magnetosphere of the Earth, where the photons are trapped. Third is, it is the ionosphere. So in this ionosphere, what happens is, the ionosphere has molecular nitrogen and atomic oxygen, and they are absorbing this photon energy. And fourth thing is this radiation. Because of radiation energy produced by these molecules of nitrogen and oxygen, beautiful cosmic glowing lights are produced over north and south polar regions. This is how we can write about this Borealis and Australis. Okay, so this is about auroras. So the next question is, what are these twisters and why the majority of the twisters are seen forming in the Gulf of Mexico? That is the question. Now this twister is nothing but tornado, or you can say in a way they are nothing but thunderstorms only. Now what is this tornado? Tornado, that is made up of this term, that is torano. It is a Spanish word that means thunderstorm. Thunderstorm. Now how they are formed, see here. Now for example, there is a surface, and on this surface, let's say the temperature is very high. Okay, because of this very high temperature, what will happen? Due to this temperature, the surface which, the air which comes in contact with this high temperature surface, it will expand and it will go up. Yes or no? Yes. After the expansion, it will become lighter compared to the surrounding air. Now, if the temperature is very, very hot, what will happen? This will go with much speed in the upper atmosphere, right? So because it is going up in a kind of rapid rate, rapid upliftment will enable this cooling of the warm air, and it will occur in vertical manner. Always remember, if there is a steep temperature gradient, what is the meaning of a steep temperature gradient? Means it is going up very fastly and therefore losing the temperature quickly. Now what happens is, due to that, you will see the cloud which is going to be formed. This clouds will be formed of this shape. What is this shape? It is known as cumulonimbus cloud. Cumulonimbus cloud, that is CNC cloud. Now remember this one. In this case, a special case, that is of twisters, you will see the base will be very narrow. From here, you will see the base is going to be very narrow and the upper part would be wider one. Now see here, the movement of air. Now see here, when the air was moving up with the great velocity, what happened is, here the pressure will be released and the low pressure conditions will be formed. Yes. Now what happens is, this low pressure will attract the winds from all the sides. When these winds will reach on this hot temperature surface, they will also converge and they will go up. Now these winds which are being attracted, they will not go in this steep manner. However, they will rotate around this low pressure in the middle, and this is going to be the motion. In that way, a kind of funnel shape you will see inside this funnel shape that is here, that is nothing but the warm air is trapped in a very smaller area around which this warm air is rotating. It's a kind of whirlpool structure. The wind speed can be as high as 300 km or more than 300 km per hour. This type of the formation of storms, they are known as tornadoes. Remember, they are characterized with funnel shape, where the narrow would be the base and wider they will be at the top. The cumulonimbus cloud, if it is formed, the cumulonimbus cloud will result into heavy amount of rainfall. Number one, lightning would be there. Hailstorm can be the possibility, right? Hailstorms can be the possibility. So all these phenomena are found in the thunderstorm also. Now what happens is, when this was uplifted rapidly, at the same time here the cooling will occur. And because of this cooling, what happens is, this is the cold air which is surrounding the funnel shape where the warm air is getting uplifted. Yes. So this type of the system, this type of the cloud, inside that, in the center we have the funnel like structure with the warm air. The steep is the gradient of the pressure, temperature. Therefore, what will happen? The cumulonimbus cloud is formed, intensive rainfall will be caused, and this system is known as tornado. Now see here, the two conditions are very necessary for any tornado to form. Number one, here you need unstable region. Instability means you must have to have warm and moist air, and it must be uplifted. Then it will bring in instability to that region. Instability means it may cause rainfall here. The second is the rapid upliftment, and this rapid upliftment is possible when the surface will have very intensive low pressure. Yes or no? Yes. Now what happens is, because of this very high temperature, the winds will be going up in the upper atmosphere. Here the cool winds are surrounding the warm air, which will also not allow this warm airs to come down in terms of their temperature quickly. So therefore what will happen? They will go and attain further heights in order to condensate. So this is how continuously this rapid system of upliftment will be maintained inside this funnel shape of kind of cyclone. This is your tornado, this is your twister, right? Now see here, after meeting these two conditions, here it would be nothing but the second condition is a steep gradient of temperature is required. Right? Some more things, let me talk about this one. Very common it is. We have talked about the wind speed. Second is, if you will see this, they can go as much as, let's say, they can cover the areas between 25 kilometer to 45 kilometer. In general, they can travel this much of the distance. Okay, it is possible. The surface area would be very smaller, funnel shape it is. So this is all about the tornado or the twister. Now the second part is why the majority of the twisters are formed in the Gulf of Mexico. Now if you are aware of this Gulf of Mexico and American topography, so see here, now I am removing this one. What happens is, in the Gulf of Mexico, see here, let's say this is the America, and here in the North America we are talking about, let's say this is the North America, here it is the Gulf Stream, also Gulf of Mexico. In this Gulf of Mexico, first thing is where most of the tornadoes will occur in this area. This is the Rockies mountain. Here it is the Rockies. This side, hardly any this type of twisters are formed. Mostly you will see the twisters will be formed in this Mississippi and in this part, that is in the southeast part. So this is the most vulnerable area, and as many as 700 twisters can be formed in this Gulf of Mexico in a year. And therefore this question has been asked because they are very common in Gulf of Mexico. Now the second question is why they are formed in the Gulf of Mexico. So here you need to understand the concept of air mass and fronts. Now what happens is, see here, what is a front? So let me tell you what is a front. In the front formation, you need two things. Number one, contrasting air masses. What is air mass? It is the huge column of air with some homogeneous properties like the same temperature, same amount of water vapor, and therefore same would be the lapse rate vertically. These contrasting air masses, if they are converging together, then they will form front. What is the front? The literal meaning is 2C, you have to remember. One is convergence and the second is contrasting air mass. Now this front is nothing but interaction of two contrasting air masses. Now see here, for example, this is any surface, and in this surface, the one which I am explaining now, the cold front. What is the meaning of cold front? Cold front is when the cold air mass is more active and it is reaching into the territory of warm air mass. At the same time, what is warm front? When warm air mass is more active and it is invading the territory of cold air mass. This time we are assuming it is the cold front. In this cold front, so what is the basic assumption? The air mass which was resting here, that is the warm air mass. Okay, this was already there. And now in this region, the cold air mass is approaching. So cold air mass, because the cold winds will be heavier, denser, therefore they will try to occupy the bottom. Now in the bottom, it is the warm air which is resting here. So these warm airs will be uplifted by cold, heavier and denser winds forcefully. and therefore they will be uplifted with almost vertical angle. So this would be the angle around which the warm air will be uplifted. So this forceful upliftment of the warm wind will create this type of spiral motion, and because of this vertical motion where the warm air are being uplifted, this type of the cloud is going to be formed. Again, what is this cloud? Cumulonimbus cloud is going to be formed. So always remember, if the speed of upliftment is somewhat faster, where the warm and moist air is going to be uplifted at a great speed, then cumulonimbus clouds will be formed. And once if the cumulonimbus cloud is formed, heavy rainfall, yes. Hailstorm, yes. Lightning, yes. Thunderstorm, yes. All these are the possibility. Now here you can see the warm and cold air mass, if they are converging together, especially in the time of cold front, where the cold front is more active, it is invading the territory of warm air mass, and therefore what happens is the warm air mass is forcefully uplifted. Now can you see this structure of the formation of cloud is nothing but similar to this funnel shape of the twister? Yes or no? Yes. Now see here. If you are now able to understand this concept of cold front, now what happens is from Gulf of Mexico, from here, it is the warm air mass which will go in this way. This is the warm air mass. And from the polar side, it is the cold air mass which will approach this region. So this side we have the cold air mass. Now what will happen to this warm air mass? The same is the picture. The warm air mass will be uplifted somewhat here. The fronts will be formed, and due to this front formation, the warm air will be uplifted at a very, very fast velocity, and therefore a spiral motion will be attained by this warm air around a low pressure, creating a kind of funnel shape where the base is narrow, the size, that is the upward part, that is the head of the cloud, is going to be very broad, and then this type of twisters are gonna form in this, especially in this area. So it is because of the cold air mass and the warm air mass, when they two are interacting, the element of instability has been introduced here, where the warm air will be uplifted rapidly, and it will result into the formation of these tornadoes or twisters, which are very common in this area of Mississippi and southeast states of America. Okay, so this is how you could have explained in this answer why they are very common in such areas. That is about the geography related question. I hope this discussion was useful for you.